bad connection, so I will do that. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Bento.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the County of Los Angeles Citizen Redistricting Commission regular meeting. Today is November 10th, 2021, and the time is 7:01 p.m. We will now call the public meeting to order. For this meeting, we have available interpretation services. For those who are joining via Zoom, please select your preferred language by clicking on the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, which is the globe icon. Select English or Spanish. You then can choose to mute the original audio for clearer interpretation. If you do not choose a language, you will not hear the interpretation. As a reminder to the public, this public hearing is being recorded and live streamed to youtube.com/LA County Redistricting. The link to the recording will also be posted and accessible through the Los Angeles County Redistricting website. If at any time any members of the public has any technical difficulties, please let us know in the Q&A and we can work towards fixing the issue. I will now take the roll. As a reminder, commissioner names will be called in a rotating alphabetical order by last name. Commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Present.
Commissioner Apollonia Morales.
Here.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Present.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpanella Segura.
Present.
Commissioner Haile Soto.
Present.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
Present.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Here.
Commissioner John Bento.
Here.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Present.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
Present.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Present.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
Present.
Commissioner Mary Kenny.
Here.
And Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Present.
Thank you. I will now turn the agenda over to Co-Chair Williams.
Thank you, Ty, and I must apologize. For some reason, I'm unable to start my video. So if it's fixed, you will see me. If not, you have my face. In terms of approval of the agenda, if there are no objections, we'd like to move consent items to after the action item 6A and B. We'd like to get to public comments sooner, and we also have important input from two speakers from the East Coast, Bruce Everson as well as Quincy Nathan. So if there are no objections, we will move. The only change to the agenda will be moving consent items to after again, A and B. Okay. So we will now move to public comments. These are for general public comments for items that are not on the agenda. So Ty, would you provide the directions for participation in the public comments at this time?
Of course. So if you are interested in making a live public comment, you may submit in the Q&A your name, your affiliated organizations, if any, and that you would like to make a public comment, and also the agenda item. When you are called to make your public comment, you will be prompted to unmute your mic so you can speak. And if you are participating via phone, press *9 to raise your hand. Once called upon, press *6 to unmute and speak. Each person will have one opportunity to speak for 1 minute. When you begin making your comment, please share your name and any affiliation you may have. Again, if you would like to make a live public comment, please put into the Q&A your name and, very importantly, the agenda item. We do have a few items on today's agenda. Again, the Q&A is for members of the public to sign up to make a live public comment. But if you have any additional comments you would like to make, including public comments for specific draft maps, they can be submitted to the public comment form. You can find the link in the chat or on the CRC website. And again, submitting to the public comment form ensures that your written comments are accurately recorded. I'm just going to take a moment to show folks how to access the public comment form. And just as a quick reminder on how to submit public comments. So the link is in the chat, but you can also access the public comment form through the CRC website. So this is the homepage, and all you will need to do is click on Submit Comments for Meetings and Hearings. This will open a new tab, and what you will need to do is to enter in your first name, your last name. All these other items are optional. You do not need to fill them out. It's up to you. You can attach any additional documents if you would like. And then you would just need to select which item you would like to make a public comment on. So for example, we can click on agenda item number 4. And then you must choose whether you're in favor, oppose, or other. And then also the comments are optional, but this is where you can leave additional comments. Once you leave your comment on the specific agenda item, you will just need to enter in the security code at the bottom. And then you can press next. And then it will go to a verification page. And then all you will need to do is press acknowledge, and that will submit your public comment to the public comment form. So with that, we can move on to general public comments for agenda item 4. So just give me a moment as I set up the timer. Okay, so first we have Jasmine from Inner City Struggle. Jasmine, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself. Once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jasmine Garcia, and I am a student at Roosevelt High School. I am here today with Inner City Struggle and the People Block showing my support for Map A. This map is the most representative of my community. I want to highlight the importance of the unique history that the East Side has. We are warriors and always fighting for our rights. From remaining in our houses and bringing resources to our community, any map that separates the East Side from District 1 hurts the work that we have been able to move forward throughout the years. Please, as you continue to talk about maps, highlight the importance of the East Side not being separated from the supervisional District 1. Any map that removes us from our current district is creating more harm than good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Next, we have Alicia Godinez, and I believe this is going to be a public comment in Spanish. And so again, just a quick reminder for members of the public, if you need a interpretation, please choose the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom icon. You need to select English or Spanish.
I'm hearing the Spanish as well as the English.
Yes, so Gloria, I believe you are in the English channel. Okay, and so again, you just need to select the specific channel you need to be in.
Gloria, you're coming through in the English channel versus the Spanish channel. Please double.
Yes. So you need to be in the Spanish channel for the translation.
I guess for us to hear the translation, she'll be in the English channel, but right now we're hearing the Spanish.
Okay, so Alicia, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment.
Sí, muy buenas noches. Mi nombre es Alicia Ortiz y soy líder comunitario en el este de Los Ángeles y quiero expresar mi apoyo absoluto al mapa A para que las comunidades del este de Los Ángeles no incorporados como City Terrace, Boyle Heights, El Sereno y Lincoln Heights sigan bajo el Distrito Supervisor 1. El mapa A mantendrá a estas comunidades unidas ya que comparten un legado cultural único. Juntos vivimos una pandemia histórica que dejó ver aún más las desventajas sociales y nosotros, unidos, hemos luchado contra las injusticias. Como nosotros hemos luchado también para conseguir protección para nuestros inquilinos que enfrentan aún todavía desalojos injustos. Y lo conseguimos. Cualquier mapa que separe al Distrito Supervisor 1 tendrá un enorme impacto en el trabajo de justicia social que hemos realizado. Estas comunidades ya en una sola se convertirán en única, fuerte, empoderada y mucho mejor. Muchísimas gracias.
All right, thank you, Alicia. Next, we have Maria Brenes. Maria, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for your time and service again. I am Maria Brenes, and I serve as the Executive Director for Inner City Struggle. Our organization is based in the east side of Los Angeles since 1994. There's so much at stake for our east side communities in regards to LA County redistricting, as representation on the Board of Supervisors matters greatly. The east side includes Boyle Heights, unincorporated East LA, El Sereno, and Lincoln Heights. This is truly a historic community of interest. The next most aligned community of interest geographically and culturally, historically, has been eastward. This connection has been reinforced through the pandemic as collaborative work has increased to advance housing justice and mutual aid efforts for highest need communities in the first district. I urge you to keep the entire east side in the first district. Please advance Map A further in your deliberations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria. Next, we have Beatriz Sotero, and I believe it will be in Spanish as well. So Beatriz, momentarily, you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment.
Buenas noches, comisionados. Mi nombre es Beatriz Soltero y vivo en el este de Los Ángeles. Estoy con la lucha del pueblo y en apoyo del bloque del pueblo. El día de ahora estoy llamando para levantar la importancia de mantener en el Distrito 1 el este. Quiero demostrar mi apoyo hacia el mapa A. ¿Cuál es el más representativo de mi comunidad? Este Distrito 1 ha sido ejemplar en proteger la comunidad latina, que es la mayoría que está aquí. Estas comunidades vibrantes están compuestas principalmente por trabajadores esenciales y la pandemia de COVID-19 ha exacerbado las desigualdades estructurales persistentes. Hemos podido pelear por las protecciones para nuestras comunidades más importantes, pero la lucha continúa. Escuchen nuestras voces cuando decimos que no queremos ser separados de nuestro hogar en el Distrito 1. Gracias.
Thank you, Beatriz. Next, we have Rosa Soto. Rosa, momentarily, you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Rosa Soto, and I'm a concerned resident of North Whittier. I'm writing in support of Map A, or I'm speaking in support of Map A by the People's Bloc. The east side of Los Angeles is connected by culture, history, and our immigrant roots. The east side communities have historically experienced racial injustice, and this has been a catalyst for our social movement. It is this shared legacy that makes us significant and a strong community of interest. We should remain together with the rest of Supervisorial District 1 to further empower our community and our historic roots, fueling that. I listened through the almost 5-hour meeting on Sunday and believe that my mind is certain. Eastside must remain together. In my daily work, I see the importance of leaders truly understanding the plight of our community and reflecting similar struggles of their neighbors. It is important that our representatives reflect the same background as our community, and I ask for your support for Map A. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Next, we have Sandra Guzman. Sandra, momentarily, you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Sandra Guzman, and I am a stakeholder of Los Angeles County and Supervisorial District 1. I am here today submitting my public comment to demand the commissions to keep the historic Eastside communities and unincorporated East Los Angeles, Boyle Heights, City Terrace, El Sereno, and Lincoln Heights together. It is very important that these communities remain unified in Supervisorial District 1 and that they do not become separated and placed in different districts. Map A achieves that, and I am in full support of that map. For years, we have been fighting to get more equitable investment in our communities. The pandemic has greatly impacted the East Side, and we need to ensure that we remain under District 1 to be able to continue to fight for those who have been more impacted and can recover from unprecedented pandemics. Moving the East Side communities into separate districts would disconnect our communities from their more natural communities of interest located where SD1 is situated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sandra. Next, we have Sean Cazares. Sean, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Sean Cazares. I am a member of the Foothill Communities. Just to clarify for the Commission, the Foothill Communities must remain in 5th District. I'm in full support for Map D since it perfectly represents the Foothill Communities. Map A is the second best option for us in the Foothill Communities. We would like the inclusion of Covina in District 5 and Walnut to be included in District 1. Map B is the third option we support. We'd like Pomona to be taken out of District 5 and included in District 1 since they don't share a community of interest with us. Finally, we in the Foothill Communities urge the Commission to oppose Map C for the reasons I've submitted already. Thank you for your time and tireless efforts in making this process transparent as possible.
Thank you, Sean. Next, we have Maria Ruiz. I believe will be commenting in Spanish. So Maria, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 2 minutes to make your public comment.
Aló, ¿me escuchan?
Yes.
Ok. Buenas noches, comisionados. Mi nombre es María Ruiz y vivo en Boyle Heights por más de 20 años. Estoy aquí con la lucha del pueblo y en apoyo de People's Bloc. Quiero expresar mi apoyo al mapa A, cuál es el mapa que fue desarrollado con la contribución de comunidades a través de Los Ángeles. Hemos trabajado por años para mantener una comunidad unida, levantar y compartir nuestros valores. Los mejoramientos de nuestra comunidad han sido a través de líderes, de padres, madres, estudiantes, que hemos peleado por recursos a través de nuestro distrito por años. Es importante que nuestras generaciones futuras se mantengan en unidad. Nuestra lucha es para mejorar la calidad de vida, para la vivienda, para mejorar nuestras escuelas. No podemos separarnos cuando hemos peleado a través de muchos años para desarrollar nuestra comunidad en lo que es ahora, especialmente en esta pandemia que hemos pasado. Han quedado muchos problemas que se tienen que resolver. Es muy importante, por favor, mantengan al este en el Distrito 1. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Maria. Next, we have Christy Hernandez. Christy, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you so much, first and foremost, for your public service and for your time. We really do appreciate that. My name is Christy Hernandez, and I am battery's about to die. Let me just charge this. And I'm the chair of my local neighborhood council, the Maravilla Community Advisory Council, located in unincorporated East Los Angeles. And I'm calling today in support of Map A. As a third generation resident and homeowner, I ask that you maintain the integrity of our community and keep us in the supervisorial District 1. And again, thank you so much for your time. And we ask that you continue to keep this process transparent and fair. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Christy. Next, we have Chris Rowe. Chris, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Thank you, supervisors. I was looking at the maps. I again submit maps or support maps B and D, but I was trying to look at the layers today. Commissioner Stetcher mentioned last time that he had split Santa Monica. The boundary there should be at Sunset Boulevard. And if you take Santa Monica out of District 3 for that map, then you will be able to add back parts of the San Fernando Valley at the top to gain population. The boundary for the San Fernando Valley should be at the 405 on the east side and limit the amount that goes up into the Santa Clarita Valley, please. You do have more rural communities in that side, the east side of the 405. And also for population, you might be able to pick up Burbank and Glendale as well. It all depends on the population, because I saw on map B an undercount. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we have Kimberly Fuentes. Kimberly, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, honorable commissioners and staff. My name is Kimberly Fuentes, and I am the Policy and Communications Director for California League of United Latin American Citizens. The organization has been in existence since 1929, and their mission is to address the educational attainment, economic condition, health, civil rights, and political empowerment of the Latino population. Thank you to the commission and staff for serving in this capacity. I'm here to formally submit California LULAC support for draft map C submitted by MALDEF. Our Latino populations have grown within the last decade, as demonstrated in the 2020 United States Census. We need to redraw district lines to reflect this. We support option C because it is the only map that fully respects all Los Angeles County communities. Option C unites communities that have much in common when it comes to socioeconomic status, culture, and language. Most importantly, option C provides the Latino community with fair representation. Please find our letter attached in the public comments. Should you have any questions for California LULAC, please feel free to contact Kimberly Fuentes at kfuentes.lulac@gmail.com. Thank you.
Kimberly. Next, we have Christy Hernandez. Christy, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you so much for your service, and great to see you all again. I saw you last time in the San Fernando Library, and now we're here virtually. My name is Christy Hernandez. I'm a CHIRLA member, and I am from the San Fernando Valley. I have lived here all of my adult life. I would tell you how many years that is, but I'm sure you don't want to know. And today I just want to tell you that we are here in support of map C. And I come in representation of myself, but also to tell you that I am with CHIRLA, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights. And the members of CHIRLA and leadership have taken a vote. They've been very engaged in this process and have decided that it's map C that respects low income and immigrant communities in the East San Fernando Valley and separates these communities from surrounding high socioeconomic neighborhoods of the West San Fernando Valley. Having lived all across the valley, I know the importance of this, and I hope that you will take deep consideration of map C, as that is the one that we know supports what the valley needs on immigrant communities.
Thank you, Aurelie. Next, we have Ismael Castro. Ishmael, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Thank you for your time, commissioners. My name is Ismael Castro. I live and work in the East Side and have been involved in advocacy efforts with my community for over 5 years. We are a strong community and have historic.
I'm sorry, it's a little difficult to hear you. I apologize for interrupting, but I'm not sure if other folks are having the same issue.
I wonder, Ishmael, if you've turned on your preference for English under the interpretation button.
Okay, I have done it now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me better?
No. At the bottom of your screen, there should be something that looks like a little globe. And if you click on that, you'll have a choice of English or Spanish.
Alrighty, I've selected English. Can you hear me, or is it still not working?
So Ishmael, I believe it's something to do with your device. Can you speak closer to the mic?
Yeah, how's this?
It's still a little low.
Okay, can I go after the next person while I figure this issue?
I think it's working a bit better on my end. Or other folks are still having difficulties?
I can hear him.
Okay. So yeah, Ishmael, let us come back to you as you resolve that issue. Right. So we're going to move on to Alejandra Castro. Alejandra, momentarily you'll be able to unmute your mic. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. My name is Alejandra. I'm a resident of Boyle Heights for 10 years right now and a property owner. And I am speaking today in support of MAP 8 developed by the People's Bloc. Through the COVID pandemic, the challenges in our community have grown drastically. And in order for us to recover well, the equitable representation of our community, representatives that prioritize the community need will be essential. Keeping the east side with supervisorial District 1 will allow us to continue the work in fighting for our issues that are impacting the community due to the pandemic. And, any map that separates the east side from supervisorial District 1 will impact the work that we have been able to accomplish over the past years, advocating successfully for our community. So I want to thank you today and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alejandra. Next, we have Ruby Rivera. Ruby, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. Once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Ruby Rivera, and I am a lifelong resident of Linwood, and I have been organizing in the East Side for over 10 years. Today, I'm here representing both my local interests as a CELA resident, as well as the demands of the members of Inner City Struggle that I serve. It is important to create a second Latinx seat, but it would be a disservice to do it at the expense of the East Side. Any map that separates the East Side from Supervisorial District 1 will impact the work that we have been able to accomplish over the past years, the work that led us to passing tenant protections for unincorporated cities that were facing unjust evictions. I ask for the East Side to remain within Supervisorial District 1 in the configuration of Map 8 to ensure that it will remain with communities that share common interests and that will allow us to continue our fight towards equity. I also look to the future. As we envision a just recovery, equitable representation of our communities will be critical. Representatives that prioritize the community's needs will be essential. Map 8 keeps the CELA community together and creates an opportunity for a Latinx seat through Unitedness in District 4. For this reason, I'm asking that you all adopt Map 8, the People's Bloc map, as our starting point.
Thank you, Ruby. Ishmael, do you want to give it another try?
Hello, can you hear me?
It's a little bit better, yes.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, commissioners. My name is Ismael Castro. I live and work in the East Side and have been involved in advocacy efforts with my community for over 5 years. We are a strong community and have historically worked together as communities of SD1 to ensure that our voices are heard to get the support and resources that we need. Since COVID-19, I have seen heartbreaking images in my community, families living in cars, students without the proper technology and space to engage in their learning, and lots of food insecurity. For this reason, I am calling in support of Map A submitted by the People's Bloc, because it keeps our communities, which stretch beyond our local neighborhoods, together to continue working on the issues we care about with a long history of work in Supervisorial District 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishmael. Next, we have Daniel Jimenez. Daniel, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hola, buenas noches, comisionados. Mi nombre es Daniel Jiménez. Mi nombre es Daniel Jiménez y por los últimos 4 años he trabajado con las familias del este de Los Ángeles con la lucha del pueblo. Hoy estoy aquí en apoyo del mapa A. Este mapa mantendrá nuestra comunidad del este de Los Ángeles dentro del Distrito 1. Hemos sido afectados de manera profunda por la pandemia de COVID-19 que vino a exaltar la crisis que ya se vivía desde hace décadas. Es importante que para que tengamos una recuperación donde las comunidades más afectadas reciban el apoyo necesario para salir adelante, se mantenga al este dentro del Distrito 1 y que no se separe de ninguna manera. Cualquier intento de separar al este de Los Ángeles tendrá consecuencias que impactarán a las familias y truncarán el gran trabajo que hemos realizado como las protecciones para los inquilinos y asegurar que las familias no se queden en las calles sin un techo de donde dormir. Es por eso que hoy exijo que se adopte el mapa A, porque creo que este mapa es el más representativo de nuestras comunidades. Gracias y que tengan buenas noches.
Thank you, Daniel. Next, we have John Mendoza. John, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Can you hear me, commissioners?
Yes.
Okay, my name is John Mendoza. I'm a 30-year resident here in the city of Pomona. Also, I was raised in the west side towards the Santa Monica area. I participated a lot in struggles there for education and so forth. I think the map is the most effective map that looks further into the future and focuses on key rights of the Voter Rights Act, above all, which we should be focusing on here. It's for that reason that I support the Maldiv map, which looks at everything from a regional level rather than just separate cities and so forth, and key voter rights acts. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next, we have Yolanda Marietta. Yolanda, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment. I see Yolanda has put their hand down. Yolanda, if you would still like to speak, you can raise your hand again. So we're going to move on to Anna Para. Anna, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. Thank you for this moment to address you on this very important issue. I really would like to ask that you consider the unique history of the east side of Los Angeles and to maintain it within the supervisorial District 1. The east side of Los Angeles is connected via vital cultural commonalities and immigrant roots. And to maintain this history, this rich culture, we need to have these communities stay connected and stay within the first supervisorial district. In support of that, I'm asking you to consider supporting choosing map A so that we can keep these communities together, so that these communities who have a rich history in creating history, making history, can continue to do so in the future and provide the vital, not only resources for its residents, but also maintain that cultural connectedness as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And with that, I believe we have no other in queue. Co-chairs, would you like to close public comment for, I believe we have one more that just popped up. Next, we have Jessica Panduro. Jessica, momentarily, you'll be able to unmute yourself. And once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
I don't know if y'all missed anyone because I had also submitted the Q&A my name and I wasn't called. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Jessica Panduro. I am here today with Inner City Struggle and the People's Blog showing my support for Map A. This map was created with community input. It is a map that represents our community and acknowledges this deep history of the East Side. It also creates another Latino seat to represent LA County without hurting other communities. It is critical for the East Side to remain in Supervisorial District 1. We have been able to build unity and work to ensure that we are able to protect our families. Any map that separates the East Side from Supervisorial District 1, it is a map that doesn't ensure the best interests of our community. The commission should consider the unique history of the East Side of LA to maintain it with Supervisorial District 1. The East Side of LA is connected via vital cultural commonalities and immigrant roots. The East Side community has also experienced racial injustice and has been catalyst for social movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Just as a reminder to members of the public, if you did not put, if you were not called yet and you believe that was a mistake, please put your name again in the Q&A. So next we have Anna Godoy. Anna, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Anna Godoy, and I'm a lifelong resident of LA County. For the past 4 years, I've had the privilege and honor to work with youth and parents in the East Side. I'm here again today to defend the East Side and the collective power and progress these residents have accomplished over the years. Commissioners, the East Side must be kept in Supervisorial District 1, and the map I still support is Map A. First, I would like to thank you for starting off with public comment for today's meeting. I joined this past Sunday, and even after hearing all of the presentations, I still support Map A. Map A leaves East Side residents in a supervisorial district they are familiar with and connected to resources they are currently using. Residents should not be disrupted from services they are receiving, especially as we recover from a pandemic. The questions and recommendations commissioners propose for Map A are valid and should be dissected more. I commend Commissioner Stretcher for putting together a map, but Map B eradicated a historical Black CVAP for Supervisorial District number 2. Map B had a lot of issues that Map A is already showing. Again, I oppose Map C because it puts the East Side in District 3 and connected to the Valley. I hear the Valley's needs that they need fair representation, but it shouldn't be at the expense of the impact of the East Side. Please consider Map A to fulfill the needs of the East Side and other districts.
Thank you, Anna. Next, we have Cynthia Perez. Cynthia, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
My name is Cynthia Perez. I'm a lifelong resident of La Mirada, and I'm calling in support of Map A. The People's Block map is the only option that I feel represents the true needs of my community. As a Latinx person living in La Mirada, I feel that political representation is the utmost importance. Uniting my community with the communities outlined for District 4 in Map A will create an opportunity for the voices of my Latinx neighbors to finally be heard. I strongly oppose Map C because it breaks apart the East Side. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next, we have Yolanda Marietta. Yolanda, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment. All right, Yolanda, it says that you are using an older version of Zoom, so I'm gonna temporarily promote to panelists. Holly, is that okay? Just wanted to confirm that. I'm getting a notification that the user is using an older version, so they aren't able to use the allow to talk function.
That's fine.
All right. So Yolanda, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
¿Sí? ¿Me escuchan?
Yes, so Yolanda, you have 2 minutes.
Ok. Hola, buenas tardes. Comisionados, mi nombre es Yolanda Marietta, residente de Boyle Heights por más de 27 años, donde he criado a mis hijos. Hoy estoy aquí como constituyente del distrito número 1 y en apoyo al mapa A. La comisión debe considerar la histórica y única del lado del este de Los Ángeles y mantener el distrito 1. Nuestras comunidades están conectadas por la cultura, tradición y nuestras experiencias como comunidades inmigrantes que han llegado en busca de una mejor vida. El este de Los Ángeles también ha sido un distrito donde nuestras comunidades se enfrentan la injusticia racial y discriminación. Sin embargo, el este de Los Ángeles se ha mantenido fuerte y ha sido la cuna de muchos movimientos sociales que se han centrado en la equidad y la justicia racial. La pandemia nos ha afectado mucho, especialmente aquí en mi comunidad del este. Yo he sido voluntaria para distribuir comida en mi comunidad y he visto con mis propios ojos la necesidad que hay. Ahora más que nunca debemos mantener al este como lo hace el mapa A. Cualquier mapa que separe el lado del este del distrito supervisor 1 tendrá un impacto en el trabajo que hemos podido realizar durante los últimos años. El trabajo que nos llevó a aprobar protecciones para inquilinos, para ciudades no incorporadas que enfrentan peligro de quedarse sin hogar. Es por eso que hoy pido que adopten el mapa A. Muchas gracias. Pasen buenas noches.
Great, thank you, Yolanda. Next, we have Osvaldo Dominguez. Osvaldo, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hello, my name is Osvaldo Dominguez, and I am a resident of City Terrace. I'm running to support of Map A, developed by the People's Block. The East Side of Los Angeles has a shared legacy of racial struggle and empowerment and strong, hardworking immigrants. We depend on the resources allotted to us by the equitability distributed among our community. Representatives that are from our community and rooted in the political struggle of the East Side are the most equipped to respond to our community's needs. We cannot lose the momentum we have made throughout the past decade. I have been part of the community work for the last 2 decades, and I can see that our representatives today are finally responding to more important needs of our community as we face COVID-19, eviction moratoriums, rent relief, and the People's Bloc keeps the East Side communities together. Unincorporated East Los Angeles, Boyle Heights, El Sereno, and Lincoln Heights, united and whole under the same district as Montebello, Pico Rivera, Alhambra, Monterey Park, San Gabriel, and El Monte. These communities are predominantly Latinx, immigrant, and low income who rely on services and programs from social services.
Thank you, Osvaldo. Thank you. Your 1 minute is up. Thank you. With that, I believe we have no other in queue. Co-chairs, would you like to close public comment for agenda item 4?
Yes, because we'll have an opportunity for additional comments later. Okay. So at this time, let's move to action item 6. A presentation, an update and a presentation on the analysis of the current 4 map options that we're looking at. We're on racially polarized voting analysis. The presentation will be by our consultants, Bruce Eggleston from the East Coast. Welcome, Bruce.
Thank you.
And Dr. Jonathan Katz, who's here from California Institute of Technology. And Bruce is with University of Pittsburgh School of Law, in addition to Federal Compliance Consulting. So welcome.
Thank you.
Bruce and Jonathan.
Thank you and good evening, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be with you here again. What we were thinking we would do is I have a short PowerPoint that I think at this stage of your process, there are some points that we thought it's important to really stress. And of course, we're very happy to answer your questions. But one of the things that I wanted to just start out with is, as you're at this stage of the process, as I'm sure you're experiencing, there is a significant amount of lobbying and advocacy. People trying to get your attention on various issues, lobby for various maps and configurations. That's a big part of redistricting, certainly with the public body. That will continue, and it's something that I very much appreciate and can relate to, having been involved in that in many different ways. But I also, just as a cautionary note, not only do I empathize with the amount of advocacy you're experiencing, but also I want to leaven that a little bit with a cautionary tale of there are people out there, whether they're organizationally or individually, who are, as one of my commissioner with one of my other clients told me, that Bruce, we can always tell the extent of the lobbying and advocacy if people are basically saying the same thing to us over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So that's something I just wanted to mention, that it's something I can appreciate maybe happening, and I expect that it will continue. And in fact, the pace will hasten as you move forward. So would you like me to share my screen, or would you like to manipulate the PowerPoint?
I can put it up and then just say next slide.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gayla.
No problem.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to stress is something we've talked about before, but now I think it really is significant, building a full, complete, and transparent record that is absolutely essential, including justifications and explanations for why you're doing whatever it is you're doing. And there will be several slides where I'm citing to the Harris versus Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission case from 2016. As you know, at that time, we won 9-0 before the Supreme Court. The quote I hear that you see here, there's other quotes you'll see later on, really bear witness to my point, that throughout the oral argument before the Supreme Court and at the trial court, over and over and over again, the courts would say, well, that's not supported by the record, meaning the argument of the plaintiffs or the appellants, or their record says something else, or their record explains exactly why they did what they did. So I have to really stress that. Record is incredibly important in public bodies when it comes to redistricting. Next slide, please. And to that end, I want to talk briefly about deviations from equal population. As you can see here, that the Supreme Court in the Harris case, particularly the second paragraph, talked about how the court believes that attacks on deviations under 10% will rarely succeed and only in unusual cases. But we're not surprised that the appellants in this particular case failed to convince us because their arguments all were contrary to the record that we kept. So deviations, as you know, you don't have to have absolute equality of population like the congressional districts need to the extent that you have deviations typically that venture close to 10%, explaining why. What's the reason? What's the justification? So it is rare that someone will prevail in a challenge to a deviation that is, as the court says here, under 10%, but it's no guarantee. I think the best guarantee is the title of this presentation. The record bears out this conclusion. Your record, your full record, your complete record will show why you're doing something, and that as the challenges, the legal challenges begin, that record is something that will be a very important part to justify and explain to courts what your decision-making process was. Next slide, please. So I know that in one of the draft plan B, you have a maximum deviation. It's about 5%. That's still pretty low. And the stressing the point of, again, why did you do what you did? What is your explanation? And really just paint that record as fully as possible to justify your decision-making process. Next slide, please. So I know I'm really banging away at this, but I can't stress it enough that robust, transparent, full record. And as the court says, we're not surprised that the appellants have failed to meet their burden. Well, why? Why they weren't surprised? Because they kept turning to the record that invariably supported every allegation that we made and rebutted every allegation that the challengers made. Next slide, please. So this slide is just to reiterate what I said earlier about advocacy. I know you're hearing from lots of people, lots of groups advocating one thing or another. The information is not always, let's just say, complete. And sometimes people will provide snippets of information hoping to influence you. So please keep that in mind. Excuse me. Public comment is not always what it seems to be. I am, of course, a big supporter in listening to public comment. The comments that you got tonight can be very significant, but please keep in mind that there are a lot of people who are trying to get you to do what it is they want you to do. Next slide, please. And racially polarized voting and Board of Supervisor elections. Dr. Katz is here to talk about things from a data perspective, but I think what's really important to remember, Board of Supervisor elections are nonpartisan. They're by definition different than your legislative elections. You're not doing congressional elections, redistricting. You're not the state redistricting commission doing legislative elections. You're not that, and that's a really important consideration. As Jonathan can mention later, nonpartisan elections, are different. Voters make different decisions regarding nonpartisan elections, so that when people try to analogize partisan elections like a legislative election to a nonpartisan supervisory election, they are not the same. They perform differently. They are different types of elections. Next slide, please. So as you know, race cannot predominate in your redistricting decision, meaning it can't be the overwhelmingly number one consideration that you are adhering to in redistricting. Remember, race is a very important part of redistricting. It's a required part of redistricting, under the Voting Rights Act and the US Constitution, but it cannot be the single #1 district. And that the Supreme Court, the second paragraph makes that clear. The 14th Amendment to the US Constitution forbids use of race as the predominant district boundary drawing factor. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite examples of using race in redistricting. This was a district, a congressional district in North Carolina that the Supreme Court tossed out, and you'll see the explanation in a moment. You can see this district is reaching out for all kinds of different groups. The way I describe it, and forgive me if I said this before and I'm just not remembering. It's you reach out, and I look at it as a robot arm, narrow reach, whether it's the middle part in the upper northwest portion of the district. These are all seem like they're doing this for a reason. And the reason the Supreme Court said is because of race. That was their predominant reason for making all these weird shapes and these kind of robot arm reach outs. That's going to be unconstitutional. That's very dangerous to do that, and certainly something that I'm more than strongly advise doing against. So really being careful that your decision making is not primarily race-based. Remember, race is an important required criterion, but it's not the only criterion. Next slide, please. And that's what the Supreme Court said. Supreme Court called this a serpentine district, which I would agree with, was nothing if not race-centric and could not be justified as a reasonable attempt to comply with the Voting Rights Act. Next slide, please. However, the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment prohibit discrimination against people based on color, race, and a language minority group membership. So you can't have race predominate. You can also not make decisions that discriminate against people based on these protected categories, meaning you can't say, well, there's this 80% minority community. Let's split it up into 8 pieces and divide it every which way. That's going to be problematic. So keeping in mind, no racial gerrymanders, no reach outs, but no decision-making where you are diluting minority population, cracking or packing minority groups, which we'll talk about in a moment. Next slide, please. Cracking and packing. So what's cracking? Splintering, dividing minority populations into small pieces across several districts so that the large, a constituent, a large minority group ends up with either little chance of impacting certain elections or their overall political power is diluted. Packing is, in a way, at least to me, could be easier to understand. If you're creating districts that are 75, 80, 90% majority minority, that's going to raise a red flag because that would suggest that you are packing minority voters into one district where you don't need to for minority voters to have a voice in electing. That last sentence that's underlined is really important. Sometimes in equalizing population or in creating districts, you might combine a majority minority city or community with a large community that's overwhelmingly Anglo, that votes differently, has different cultural and historic antecedents. That could have a dilutive effect. So that's something that I always work with my clients in as they're redistricting, that, well, why did you put this city with that city? That may have a dilutive impact. That may have a discriminatory impact. It's something to be aware of, and looking at the populations of these communities, the voting age populations as well, to make sure that there's a good, let's say, mesh and a good connection. Next slide, please. As you can see, this is a Cooper versus Harris Supreme Court decision in 2017 to have a strong basis and evidence to conclude that you have to do something to comply with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, where you are creating a majority minority district, for example. The redistricting jurisdictions, such as the commission, must carefully evaluate whether a plaintiff could establish the preconditions of the Thornburg versus Jingles case, but that point that's underlined is key. Is there white bloc voting that usually blocks minority voters from electing their candidates of choice? As you know, in our report, we concluded in Board of Supervisor elections that usually does not happen. If there's no usual white bloc voting, you don't have that same justification potentially of creating a majority-minority group, a majority-minority district, because Anglos are not voting usually as a bloc to block the candidates of choice of minority voters, again, in Board of Supervisor elections. That's all we're talking about here. Next slide, please. So, very important, I get these questions all the time. The Voting Rights Act does not require California or any state to have any majority-minority districts. There's nothing in the statute that says that. The Supreme Court doesn't say that. Remember, the process is data, analysis, election result, traditional redistricting criteria driven. Just to say, hey, let's have a majority-minority district of 65%. Without analysis to support that, that's going to be a problem. So the Voting Rights Act does not guarantee, require, or mandate that any state, any county, any city has a certain number of majority-minority districts. I was asked by a reporter in another state, what is the magic number in the Voting Rights Act for us to know how many majority-minority districts we need to have? When I said there is no magic number, that it's all analysis and election result driven, he was really surprised to hear that. So, but that's what the law says. It's a data and analysis driven process, as you can see at the bottom. Determinations are district by district based, functionally based on the electoral performance of the district and the ability of voters to elect candidates of choice. You have, in a way, you have a unique situation. Your supervisory districts are about 2 million people. That's bigger than a congressional district. You have a lot of room potentially to play and to make adjustments as you see fit that other counties, other states don't have. They would be, in a way, they'd be envious of having such large districts where you have a lot of opportunity to keep traditional communities together, for example, if that's something you choose to do. Next slide, please. So again, I'm really stressing, please do not set arbitrary mechanical racial population targets. You can't do that. That is unconstitutional. The Supreme Court was very clear in the last round of redistricting that these mechanical arbitrary targets are legally unsupportable. This is a very good case as far as explaining that the Alabama went into redistricting, deciding to create a certain number of districts with an arbitrary Black population. It wasn't based on any analysis or election results. They just said, let's do that. And the Supreme Court said, you can't. That's a 14th Amendment issue, violates equal protection guarantees, can't do that. Next slide, please. I think this is a really important point. In fact, and I'm glad I had an opportunity to hear so many public comments tonight. You can keep, as part of your traditional redistricting criteria, historic, compact, discrete, and traditional Latino, Black, Asian, and other minority and minority language communities together. They share culture, they share a history, they share various commonalities of interest. So particularly in urban areas where you have these discrete, compact, easily viewable, I guess, one description, minority communities, you can elect to keep them together. And in fact, I think that's always a recommendation that I make, certainly based on public comments. So keeping historic, these discrete minority communities together, that's not packing, because this is not going to issues about ability to elect or not elect. As you know, and Dr. Katz can speak more to this to this later, that we found there is not cognizable racially polarized voting in Board of Supervisor elections. Again, that has nothing to do with other elections, congressional, legislative. That's just Board of Supervisors. Again, got to justify these decisions in the record. Otherwise, potential cracking and discrimination against people based on race or the color of their skin, or being in a language minority community. Next slide, please. You have several policy choices you can make. Crossover districts and influence districts are not specifically required by the Voting Rights Act, but you certainly can create them if you so choose. It's certainly something that I typically recommend redistricting bodies look at and examine in redistricting choices. But what are those districts? Next slide, please. So, oh, I'm sorry, go back. I'm saving the you'll get sued slide. Crossover districts are where minority populations and white populations can vote together up to a point where there's crossover support from the white community of minority candidates of choice. Influence districts are districts where the minority community is relatively small and can't control the outcome of an election, but they can influence an outcome because of their numerosity, for example, and their voting behavior history. Next slide, please. So you're going to be sued. That's just the reality with redistricting. Redistricting lawsuits are the decennial census big thing. I started doing this 21 years ago. There are a lot more lawsuits now than there were in 2000 or 2001, and there were a lot then too. So it's just something, it's something that happens. And the best preparation for that, to quote the Supreme Court again, the record bears out this conclusion. The record supports what the commission did. The record supports what the commission is claiming. That's your best preparation, because there will be lawsuits. That's just the way redistricting is these days, and voting in elections. That's a whole cottage industry of folks who are involved in that type of litigation. So it's something to be expected. But as I said, the best preparation is have a good, full, complete, robust record that explains why you do what you do. Next slide, please. And again, from the Harris Supreme Court case, this conclusion was well supported in the record. And as a result, appellants have not shown that it is more probable than not that illegitimate considerations were the predominant motivation. Again, you want the court to be saying, oh, well, their record is, let's just look in the record. Oh, I found this on page 1,355,000. That supports what they're saying. It doesn't support what you're saying because the record doesn't say anything about that. Really important. Next slide, please. That's it. So those were issues that we wanted to bring up today. Just keep them in front of you, really stress them. And now, if I could, I'd like to turn over to Jonathan for a few minutes. And Jonathan, maybe we could talk a little bit about the RPV generally and how the Board of Supervisors elections are different than partisan elections.
Sure. Thanks, Bruce. So clearly, I agree with everything Bruce has said here. I think a couple of points have sort of come up to play since our presentation at the last meeting we participated in. My job is a data analysis. I have no preconceptions, even though I'm a resident of LA County, about what the data will tell me. I do the analysis as is dictated, and in this case, we saw pretty limited evidence of any racially polarized voting, and definitely none that would sort of rise to the level of VRA Section 2 issues. So a couple issues that come to mind about this. So you might have had different, I'm a statistician, we call those priors. You might have different beliefs about what you thought you'd see in LA County, given history and your experiences. The data over the last decade of elections for Board of Supervisor elections don't bear that out. So then the next question you might be asking yourself, well, maybe we see racially polarized voting for other elections that occur within LA County. In the literature, this is in the judicial literature, this is referred to as exogenous elections. Why would an analysis like me or Bruce look at exogenous elections? Well, that happens when the data is not clear within the elections for the office you're drawing the map for. Why would the results not be clear? Well, typically that happens for two reasons. You either have a small amount of data, or you have and you have very few precincts, that is voting places, that have a relatively homogeneous population. So some precincts that in LA that are predominantly Asian, some that are predominantly Latino, some that are predominantly Anglo. That's not the case. In fact, right, the problem we have in LA is we have too much data. It's the exact opposite, I should point out. By the way, Bruce and I are both working and trying to help the Alaska, Alaskan Redistricting Commission. It's not like you, a volunteer, nonpartisan redistricting commission. The problem in Alaska is you have very few districts. You have very few precincts. So in fact, we got ambiguous results because there's just not enough data to say anything. So we had to look at other races, statewide races. All right, so again, going back to this, in the legal literature, that's referred to exogenous elections. So we go to that when there's not enough data. That's not the case in LA. If we go to other elections, it's because we have to think about elections that look like the elections that look like are similar to the elections that we're drawing the map for. In the case of Board of Supervisors, as you all know, this is a nonpartisan election. Voters approach how they vote in nonpartisan elections differently than they vote in partisan elections, right? Especially in this modern era, people seem to be highly polarized around partisan identities, right? That leads to different voting behavior. The other thing that's different is on the candidate side. So partisan elections typically lead to two candidate elections in the US style, winner take all, plurality, district-based system, right? We have Democratic candidates, we have Republican candidates. In nonpartisan elections, as we see, for example, in what are called now primaries, it's really should be referred to the first stage of the election. We often, if there's no incumbent supervisor running, we often see elections run with many candidates. 6, 7, 8 candidates is not atypical. Well, what does that mean? It means it's going to be much harder to find evidence of racially polarized voting. Why? Because it would have to be the case that one candidate drew the support of almost of a group's voters, right? And just with lots of choices, that may or may not be the case. In the elections we analyzed, that was not the case. So I just want to cover sort of two issues. I'm happy to answer any other questions about why you might have been surprised. And now you've had some time to process the slides I presented at the last meeting we attended. But I'm also happy to answer more questions either on the sort of statistics and why we analyzed the data the way we did and the findings that we made. And of course, Bruce is here to help answer the questions about the legal interpretation of those results. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. A lot of clarifying information here. And so now it's our time as commissioners to be able to ask clarifying questions. And we like to do this on a round robin basis. So I'm gonna ask Ty if he will start for the round robin questions from the commissioners.
We're going to start off with Commissioner
For
Morales.
clarification, let me make sure, just want to make sure we're doing clarification questions on at this time.
We're going to start off with Commissioner Morales.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I was first. All right, here we go. All right, you mentioned not partisan, but looking at some of the challenges back in the 1990s, what were those challenges about, just in terms of the county supervisor races? Because I want to get a little bit of a historical perspective, as you said, is important in your presentation.
I actually know, although I was a resident in the second half of the 90s, I know little about what redistricting looked like in the 1990s. And I would also caution, again, just like we talked about finding similar elections, Los Angeles County has changed dramatically since the 1990s to today, right? It's in fact now a majority non-white jurisdiction. So I honestly don't know what happened in the 90s, and I'm not really sure that the courts would find that particularly relevant if it were.
I think I would find it particularly relevant, just given the historical, challenges to what's been the way that the districts have been drawn, and back in 2011, some of the challenges that were presented there. So I think it's something that's pertinent. You also mentioned they are doing this because of race, and to the benefit of whom in that serpentine example was that for?
Bruce, you want to take it? I can answer it. I mean, I know that was to basically, that was the North Carolina legislature is trying to create yet another majority Black district. The problem is they had no concentrated geographical areas that had Black population. So this district was done to pull different Black populations from very distinct parts of the state. In fact, one of the things that was commented on is that district is at points so narrow that if you stuck your hand out both sides of your car window, you could be in 3 legislative districts, 3 congressional districts. So that's the context of that.
Again, yeah, in terms of, so who would that have benefited in terms of the makeup there? Was it the Black community or someone else?
Well, I'll let Bruce answer this. I'll add my own.
You're creating a district like the district that the Supreme Court struck down here. And as Jonathan said, you're reaching into various communities, majority Black communities, for example, and basically dividing them so you can create this narrow district that automatically is going to raise some concerns of racial gerrymander, where your decision is race-based. That's why they did this. They didn't do this to keep communities together. They didn't do this because of population deviation. They did this specifically and intentionally to affect the Black population across, as you saw, numerous counties, and breaking up several significant historic communities just to create this a district where race predominated in the redistricting choices.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have a couple more questions. You also said watch out for dilutive impact. You didn't see any evidence of dilutive impact in terms of the races that you looked at here in the county?
Jonathan, did you want to address that?
Yeah, dilutive impact is actually on how you draw the map. So the analysis, the statistical analysis that I generated tells you how voting happened historically in the recent history in Los Angeles, and asks, is there block voting? Dilutive says what Bruce meant by that, and he's the lawyer, so he can clear me up, but maybe I can say it a little more clearly because I'm not a lawyer, is basically if you were to intentionally draw a map that, say, didn't allow Latinos to have a voice in electing candidates of choice, that would be dilutive, right? Or if you choose some other group, if you draw a map that so whites lowered their voting power, that would be dilutive. So dilutive is on the drawing part, not on the analysis. The analysis tells me in historical elections, what is our best estimate of how voters from various groups voted?
Thank you, that's helpful. And I think that's something that we should really be paying attention to. You also mentioned including a white block voting in the Board of Supervisors usually does not happen. Was there, the word usually stands out.
Yeah, so I don't know if you recall my presentation. So there was one election, I forget the supervisor district. I don't have my slides open. It was in 2016. It was actually my district. I actually know this. It was my district, Supervisor District 5. Brager versus Park. Not both, as to the best of my knowledge, since it's my district, are Anglo candidates, where a slight majority of Asians and Anglos voted for Brager, and a slight majority of Latinos voted for Park. But that was the only election that showed any statistically significant. That is, we could actually clearly find a majority preferred candidate. But recall, when I define polarization, it's a sort of scale. So it wasn't the case that it was 90% of Latinos voting for Park and 90% of Anglos and Asians voting for Brager.
And also, and the term usually, that's a term that the Supreme Court used in the Thornburg versus Jingles decision. As you recall, that's the seminal Voting Rights Act Section 2 vote dilution case. So it's also important to realize the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment do not require, mandate certain election results. They don't say you must guarantee that minority voters, for example, can win, choose their candidate of choice, winning candidate of choice 100% of the time. It's usually. So it's not as that there's nothing that says it, as I mentioned, it has to be 100%. It's usually, and that term is taken from the Supreme Court decision.
Thank you. And one final question. I apologize, co-chairs, for taking up so much time, but you also mentioned that in the election analysis, you said does not require majority and minority districts. Would this apply to white voters as well?
Well, the Voting Rights Act, as you know, was passed in 1965 in response to significant Jim Crow disenfranchisement of Black voters in the South. Mm-hmm. So there are a couple of cases over time that have dealt with race and the right of white voters to be able to participate electorally. It's just as I recall a couple of cases. Our focus is on protected categories as envisioned by the Voting Rights Act and the Supreme Court decisions. So the majority-minority point is majority-minority, that the Voting Rights Act does not mandate that you must create any certain number or any number of majority-minority districts. The requirement is that people have basically an equal opportunity to elect their chosen candidates, as Jonathan's analysis found, without the white majority, if that majority exists, to block their choices of candidates. So majority minority in the literature and the court decisions is majority minority by people of color, communities of color. That's not exclusive. As I said, there are a couple of court decisions that flip that around, but the vast majority relate to people of color and communities of color.
Thank you so much. No further questions.
Commissioner Obregon?
Can you guys, okay, good, thank you. You know, it's most of the information that was received is the idea that we really shouldn't be looking at it as but it has been a big part of everything we've been looking at. When I look at maps and areas, I think areas should be compact as possible and not connected with shoelace kind of appendages. And some of the maps that were advocated have this. And how far should we view compactness versus, I'm not sure, but that's basically the compactness of areas. Thank you.
I'm going to reference this just as far as it concerns matters of race. That as you saw in the Serpentine District in North Carolina, and as has been true in a lot of cases, and certainly in the work that I've been doing this cycle and in others, when you're reaching out to grab communities, and that reach out is based on race, that you want to bring in a racial group, whether it's to dilute the opportunity of a community of color or to divide the community of color, but the decision is a racial one, that is the number one reason you're doing that. That's going to raise concerns. And in all the maps that I advise about and look at, if I see narrow reaches, narrow stretches of territory, that raises a concern. Now, the concern may not prove out after I learn more about why decisions were made. But if you have narrow, serpentine, robot arm type reaches, and they're reaching for a distinct, compact, traditional, discrete minority population of color, then that could suggest that that's a potential racial gerrymander where the redistricted decision is primarily racial. Jonathan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just add sort of maybe put a layman's term on it. If the map looks weird to you, if there's some weird aspect like these little reach outs, the commission better in their justification for the map they adopted, just explain why this is. Is it there's some natural community of interest that you're keeping together? There's some again, I think less likely here, some reason to maintain population equality, and there's just areas of low density population, which is not really the case in Los Angeles, right? So, but you just need to have some justification that's not race if you're going to do that. And it better be in the record.
And that's a great point. I certainly agree with that. And remember that, you know, as I said a few minutes ago, that you can choose to keep discrete, compact communities of color together in redistricting, communities that share culture, communities that share social concerns. You can do that. That's not packing. That's not discriminatory, because to Jonathan's point, you can justify doing that to keep communities of interest together. That's a traditional criterion, rather than splitting up communities of color and putting them into various districts. You are certainly justified in keeping these communities together. And I know that with other redistricting bodies, and I've done that here with your mapping consultant, just getting more information from me to understand what those communities are, where they're located, what's their history, what's their culture. And then there were some very interesting comments tonight about certain geographic areas. So that's a separate consideration, but that's certainly something you may choose to do. It's something that, frankly, I think is advisable to do up to a point. I mean, you're not going to create 5 districts that are 90% communities of color. That would raise its own concerns. But because LA County is a majority minority county, it's plurality Latino, you have lots of different populations that have very discrete communities. And those are communities that you may certainly choose to keep together to retain their historic and social bonds in new districts.
Thank you.
Commissioner Orpanella Segura.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I'm thinking of a particular map that was submitted, and I'm thinking about your description of narrow reaches. And I might have missed this during the presentation because I had a quick interruption, but as we narrow down the map, I just want to make sure that we'll get additional feedback from you to ensure that we're, I guess, following the laws that we're supposed to be following, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely. You know, I've talked to Holly and Gail about that. I mean, we're very happy to do that. I know that I think tonight I'm going to be staying on for a little longer. And I think that just as a good rule of thumb, as Jonathan said, if you have that, like he mentioned in North Carolina, a narrow district where you reach your arms out and you're like you're traversing 1 or 2 or 3 districts, and that narrow connection is based on race. Those are good rules of thumb to follow, but typically that, you know, I agree with Jonathan. If the shape looks weird, check it out and look at it further and figure out, why are we doing this? What's the justification for it? And we're certainly going to be as involved as you would like to provide information, guidance, and answer questions. So that's absolutely, we're very, very prepared to do that.
Thank you.
Well,
Commissioner Haile Soto.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I actually don't have any further questions because they've already been answered. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Zaira Soto.
Good evening. Thank you both. This question is for Bruce. Bruce, you opened sort of your presentation today with cautioning us about individuals who call in with a very similar comment or message. But you're also talking about, we can sort of keep an eye out for communities that are connected, whether that be culturally, socioeconomically, et cetera, right? So to me, when multiple individuals call with a similar message, I think for me, that further drives the point that this is a community that is connected, that understands each other, that is calling in for the very purpose we've asked them to call in to. So can you expand a little bit more on why, obviously we are looking at the other elements that we need to look at, but can you sort of expand on why you sort of kicked off with that? I think it certainly rang unusual, strange. I'm not sure. Can you talk more about that?
When it comes to, when it comes to this whole process, I'm very cautious. And I like to provide as much, not only cautionary tales, and I'll explain that in a moment, as possible, but also to really freight my advice with being aware of the public process and also the importance of your creating a record. That's your point. In states where I am also doing work, there have been multiple organizations that have, and this is not a reference to California, where organizations have paid people to read a specific script, and they bring little cards to make public presentations. I've seen these cards because they were left behind when, after some folks had done a presentation. So my concern is more about identical presentations, and I apologize if I wasn't clear about this, rather than similar ones, because I've seen this cycle, the political parties as well as various organizations literally paying people to read a script. So it seems as if they are advocating genuinely for a particular position. So I think as you all go about your work and you have your discernment and your own awareness of various behavior, people making various comments. This is just another FYI that it does happen. It is happening in other states. I'm not aware of this specific occurrence here, but as you move forward in your process and get close to the finish line, the advocacy is going to pick up, and the people who are trying to get your attention on various issues will also increase. So my comments are cautionary, and they're based on what I've seen in other places.
I appreciate clarifying, Bruce. And then can you also clarify, so it isn't a requirement of the VRA that we draw majority minority districts, but it also isn't, I guess I'm trying to understand, is it the opposite, illegal for us to analyze and consider based on the fact that LA County is a plurality Latino and right? So maybe can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. I think that the cases from the last round of redistricting talk about assuming that minority voters must have 58, 69, 72% voting age population to elect without analysis, without reviewing election results. So absolutely, given the population in LA and the many communities of color that you have, which from what I'm learning, many of them are very discrete, concentrated, historic, that including them in districts, you're not including them out of some artificial, unconstitutional sense that we must put all these people together so that they can elect candidates of choice. No, we're doing that because essentially that's where people live. These are their communities. We're choosing not to break them up. So that's the distinction, that in the Alabama case and in the Cooper v. Harris case, there was just an assumption that we just have to put Black voters together in these large arbitrary numbers. Why? because we want to dilute, weaken their voting strength, their voting influence by just keeping them concentrated in very few districts. And these were state legislative plans, so these are a lot more districts than you're creating. But certainly given the demographics and population in LA, it would be, I would expect, as I've seen from your draft maps, that you do have majority minority districts. The difference is that you're just not coming in saying, hey, let's create this 70% majority minority district, not based on any analysis, demographic realities, or communities of interest. You're just deciding, well, that's what we need to do. And often when that decision is made, that decision can have some nefarious intent to dilute, weaken, impair minority communities' voting strength and political influence.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you both.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Stelcher?
Yes, thank you. I have 3 questions. The first one is about things that correlate with race. I think when we were talking, when we got the presentations about the 4 maps, one of them, the conversation was, in addition to this district containing a lot of Latinx people, they are similar because they have a similar employment status. Their economic level is similar. It's not a race-based district. It is a district drawn to bring together people who share other commonalities that just are correlated with race. Respond to that argument in terms of what the law says.
I'll respond, and then I'd like you to hear from Jonathan from a data perspective. But that kind of goes to my point earlier about communities of interest and discrete historic communities that you can look at based on culture, based on when their ancestors perhaps arrived in these communities. In urban centers, urban communities, particularly where I grew up in New York City, there are a lot of historic, compact, discrete communities of all kinds of people that the decision to keep them together is more from a traditional redistricting criterion perspective of respecting communities of interest and respecting these commonalities. Jonathan, did you want to add to that?
Sure. So yeah, you are definitely correct that lots of things are correlated. We're not these discrete beings. We don't get to sort of do this. So, but the one caution I would add is that you'd be careful about people saying the reason we're doing this is X, but that's really just because we want to do it by Y, but Y is not allowed, and Y in this case is race, and so we're just trying to backdoor in the main criteria for drawing this district is to be, or set of districts is because of race, because ultimately, you know, redistricting is one of the things. What matters is sort of the outcome, not the intent. And so so it's not you should definitely consider those things, and those are valid criteria. But you also, at the end of the day, are going to have to look at the overall maps, and if the maps look odd in some way, you know, LA is a very diverse city, but you get some maps, you get some supervisor districts which are all of one ethnicity and another of all another. That's going to raise flags and opportunities for people to challenge it based on a sort of racial gerrymander. So you have to be careful that those are honest reasons. So like the examples that Bruce and I also grew up in New York City, you know, they're traditional African-American communities. I grew up in the downtown areas, which were more Jewish areas. Those are fine, right? Those are fine if you're keeping together for those reasons. But if it looks like to the court you're backdooring in some racial gerrymander, for example, that's not allowed. Even if you claim in your record the reason you're doing it is for the socioeconomic status. And again, since you are correct, socioeconomic status is unfortunately so tightly correlated to race. That's something you just keep an eye on, right? Maybe I should point out, and the thing that makes your job really hard, besides the fact that LA County is a huge place, is that you keep asking us for black and white rules. There are no black and white rules. There are processes There are justifications for why the maps look like they do. And that's the best you can do.
The second question I have is about one of those justifications. We were told in our recent meeting that this district was done this way to have a high Latino population, not just a majority in terms of total population, and not just in terms of citizen voting age population, but it should be an effective Latino district, which I took to mean voting patterns would yield Latino candidates. Could you talk a little bit more about this notion of an effective district and how one would determine if that were the case, or what the thresholds are for thinking about that, or whether it's even fair to think about it?
Jonathan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll take this. So that's the cart. So given our analysis, Bruce and our analysis, there's not racially polarized voting. This issue about questions about whether or not you're creating effective districts doesn't really come into play. If we had found substantial, legally cognizant, racially polarized voting, then you as a commission would be in the question of asking, how do we make sure that those voters who have been historically not able to elect candidates of choice can effectively do that? We're not in that world. So that analysis is not relevant. It's like a decision tree. We move there, it's not relevant.
And
now that said, again, no black and white rules. You also can't, if the board chose a map that intentionally somehow tried to dilute Latino voters' power, that also is not allowed. This whole notion about what's an effective district only comes into play when you have racially polarized voting. And then the question is how large, given that there's strong racially polarized, strong racial bloc voting, whites voting for one candidate, Latinos, say Asians, blacks voting for others, you then have to ask, and given their turnout rates and histories, what's an appropriate level of support to make sure that they're likely to prevail and not have their vote power diluted.
And to that point, if I could briefly, that again, this is about Board of Supervisor elections. You know, I have no doubt from what I understand legislatively in California and for partisan elections that there is and can be racially polarized voting. That's true in a lot of places around the country. It's certainly true in where I live on the East Coast. But I also have to stress that so while effectiveness is not the same here, as Jonathan said, as if RPV existed, it's also important to remember when we're talking about candidates of choice, the Voting Rights Act and the US Constitution do not require or mandate that someone of a particular race must win. That is not required. Voting Rights Act is not about that. It's candidate of choice. Candidate of choice can be anybody. Can be anybody of any race. That's been true historically in California. Often minority communities may elect people from their community, from a similar background, but there is no requirement that a candidate of a particular race must win a certain percentage of the time. That would be a 14th Amendment issue, and the Voting Rights Act doesn't say that.
Okay. My last question, I think, is shorter, and that is, you said you could give us or would give us feedback on specific map or maps that we're considering. When would that happen? Because we are now down to 4 maps, and it might be interesting to get your feedback on those.
I mean, that's, as I said, that's something we're happy to do that. I'd like to have a greater understanding of what the communities are that make up the maps that you've drafted. That's certainly something we're going to be doing as you move further along in the process. But because you have several draft maps that you're looking at, and I'm awaiting additional information about essentially why you decided what you did and what communities do you have these discrete, historic, concentrated, if you will, communities of color, and understanding more about that and understanding why you made the choices that you did. So all of that is part of the process. What I've done I did this in Arizona 10 years ago, and I'm doing it with some clients this cycle, is literally sit with them while they're mapping so that there is this ongoing discussion and I can have a greater understanding of why the bodies decided to do what they did.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Vento is next, but I see he just got kicked off. So we're going to move on to Co-Chair Williams.
Thank you. I have two questions. You said determinations are district by district and functionally or functional base, based on the election analysis. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure. I think that from my perspective, that's more, and it kind of connects with what Jonathan had said previously. Is there some dilutive impact? Or are you combining a historic minority community of color, with a community that is predominantly Anglo? It has different voting patterns, different issues which may impact negatively the minority community, the community of color. So I'm thinking about it in that perspective. And to Jonathan's point too, since we found no cognizable racially polarized voting in Board of Supervisor elections, I think that the concern would be more, are you doing these reach outs? Are there racial gerrymanders potentially? Are you looking to unite or bring in communities to a given district based on race? And that, as Jonathan said, to his point, I agree. That often doesn't pass the visual test. That may also not pass the test as we learn more about why you decide to do what you decide to do. So cracking and packing, that also is part of this functional analysis. Are you dividing a historic community of color into 6, 7, 8 pieces and spreading them over several districts? So that's what I mean by this district by district functional look-see, I guess, functional appraisal, to really get in a way, in the weeds understanding of why the district looks like this and why you decided to do what you did.
Okay. Second question, you mentioned polarization according to scale. I think I know what you mean, but can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Right. It sounds like a data question, Jonathan.
Yeah. So again, people like to think of polarization as 0-1, right? You're either pregnant or you're not. You're either polarized or not. That's not really what matters. What matters is a scale, right? So unfortunately there are communities in this country where 90% of African Americans vote one way and 90% of whites vote the other, right? That's a highly polarized election. In this election that I talked about, the one that showed any evidence of polarization, the rates were more like, it was a 2-candidate election. 60% of Latinos supported one candidate, and 6% of Asians, and I don't know the exact numbers, and about 60% of whites voted for the other candidate. So that's polarization. That is, they're on other sides of a half, the preferred candidate, but that's not 90. That's not 90-90. That's a highly polarized. This is a slightly polarized, right? So it's also a continuum. And the other thing, it's a continuum, is that I've only seen it in the data that I've analyzed in one supervisor election. So not only is it small amounts of polarization in that one district, in that one election, we don't see that regularly across all the elections that occurred in the last decade.
So you're looking for how often it occurs and to what extent it occurred over time. So you're looking at a number of factors.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So you want conclusive evidence that this is regularly, one group is voting one way, the other group's voting, huge majorities are voting one way versus huge majorities the other way, and that's somehow preventing the protected group from electing their candidate choice. There's just, in the supervisor elections, there's just no evidence of that. I wish I should almost put this up. My quintessential example is I did in 2001 when I first started in the redistricting expert witness work in Texas. If you look at statewide offices or their state legislative offices, which are partisan, you see white Texans voting overwhelmingly, like 80% for Republican candidates, and you see Latino and Black Texans voting like 80-90% for Democratic candidates, right? So those are incredibly high levels of polarization. We just are not seeing those in the board of supervisor elections.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bento?
No questions for me. I apologize for the poor internet connection.
Commissioner Wong?
Yes, thank you. So, yes, so Bruce, I'm glad that you were able to see the testimony tonight from the public, because I do think that's the kind of evidence to show how communities have historically been together. And I'm not sure how we could do this, but it would be helpful for us, I think, to have your guidance on these 4 maps. And I'm not sure how to provide you with kind of you and Jonathan on the background of, because we've gotten lots of public testimony about this, about that it's, you know, it happens that these are Latinx or Asian or African-American populations, you know, that we're looking at, but also it's also mainly because they are communities of interest, right? That they have historic cultural ties, they have, anyway, historically been a discrete community. And so I know that we've gotten just a lot of testimony about how, I think we've gotten testimony to show for all of these maps that we have narrowed it down to show how they're all connected. And I'm not sure if it's possible for you to look at some of the testimony so you will understand how they're connected, so you could tell us why, you know, you could understand why some of the districts, you know, go across or may not look as compact as in some maps as other maps. And it would be useful for us to have that kind of guidance. Do you think that could be done?
Yeah, Commissioner, I think that's a great point, because that really goes to what we've both been talking about, that to understand why you did what you did. What's the justification? What's the explanation? And I'll tell you something that another redistricting body asked me to do just this week, is to look at a particular district and look at public comments related to that district to see if I could discern particular discrete areas, as you mentioned, that are historic in nature, that share a culture. And I did. I mean, I had the jurisdiction, they compiled the comments for me. This was related to one specific district, and I read through the comments, and yes, they were very illustrative and really helped me to understand, yes, I understand why this particular jurisdiction wants to keep this community together. Now, this particular district didn't have a reach, and it wasn't really irregularly shaped. However, to have an irregularly shaped district, of course, up to a point where you can explain it from a historical perspective, a COI perspective, that would be immensely helpful in our understanding what your decisions are.
If I could just jump in on this very quickly, Commissioner Wong. Bruce and Jonathan will help us, as we've mentioned, going forward. Also, one thought we were looking at is this is the first meeting, and we're not yet to that agenda item, where you all will finally be discussing some of these harder decisions. We asked Bruce to be available for that. He will be staying for that. And also, we wanted to try to focus their work is if any of the 4 options were eliminated at any point, it makes it easier for them for us to know what he should be looking at and helping us tackle.
Yeah, understood. But from my perspective, it's hard to eliminate any. It would be helpful to help even eliminate some of them, depending on, you know, their guidance. That is why I was asking at this point. I understand maybe at a later point, but I think even for these 4 maps, because, you know, so so because Bruce, when you were talking about that serpentine district, that actually was probably written by a white legislature trying to not pack Black voters, but dilute their influence from what I can tell. And so we're kind of in the opposite situation where I don't think we're not required by the VRA to draw minority majority districts, but if we can, I think we do have the ability and flexibility to do that because of the population in LA County and because there are so many communities of interest that can be connected in that way. So that is just why I think it would be helpful. So
Of course, I'm sorry, of course, Commissioner, and I agree with you. And I think that that's why I really stressed this transparent, full, robust record. Explain why you're doing it, just as you were just explaining just in the last few minutes. It's very helpful to understand your decision-making process. That's something I guarantee 100 million%. Courts will look at that. They will want to see it. If you don't have it, they will make their assumptions about you, which is not the best way to go. So filling in the blanks and explaining just that, I absolutely agree. I think that's the perfect approach.
And then just one another question. I know that you say exogenous elections or elections, you know, partisan elections aren't very helpful for this nonpartisan race, but I guess I don't, and I know that you said that, you know, the state commission is looking at might have a different racially polarized and voter analysis, but I'm wondering if it even could be helpful for us though, to try to see that, because it had been pointed out in one of the public comments that they did find some racially polarized voting, you know, in some other local and statewide races in certain areas in LA County, like the San Fernando Valley, the, you know, San Gabriel Valley, Antelope Valley, and central LA. So, you know, I guess I to be comfortable and to make sure that, you know, we can withstand any challenge, if it's true, as you say, that it might very well be that we're going to be challenged. It just would be helpful, I think, for the commission to see that. And I wonder if we could try to get that analysis and have you look at it just to help us, you know, for us to have more additional information.
So I guess this is to me because it's a data question. I would strongly urge you not to do this. I, as your expert, tell you that voting behavior is very different between these two types of elections. So that there's racially polarized voting in partisan elections should not be guiding your decision making in how to draw board of supervisor elections. That's just not relevant. Even if I understand that interested parties want to raise this up because that's because they're pushing a particular political agenda. I have no agenda. My goal is to analyze data for you. And the rule says that we have to find elections that are similar in type to the elections that are being, that the map is being drawn for. There are, and the most important ones, actually, basically the only ones that really matter are the actual elections we've observed for this type. There are no other elections in LA County. And again, the only reason to look at other elections is if for some reason the data were inconclusive, and they're not. So one, you'd be wasting your money. Two, it's just not legally not relevant.
I completely agree with that. I think that that's why I really wanted to start out today with the piece and the caution about having discernment and being careful about some of the things that you may be hearing. And, you know, we've watched some of the recordings of some of the meetings, and there are some of the comments that I know that separately, we didn't watch them together. I know from my perspective, I thought, whoa, that answer is incomplete because of X, Y, and Z. I'd rather not call out specific groups and comments in a session like this, but I know I heard, and I have my notes right next to me. And when I get excited about something, my handwriting becomes even more illegible than it usually is. My handwriting, you can't really see it. It's pretty bad on this pad. because I heard a lot of stuff that I thought, whoa, it's misleading, it's incomplete. As to Jonathan's point, people advocate from their own perspective. We don't have an agenda. We don't have a political agenda. Our job is a very simple one in a way. It's to advise you and give you our best guidance and information. That's our agenda. So I completely agree. That would be inadvisable to do in this context because there are no other elections in LA County that are like Board of Supervisor elections.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks.
Mr. Franklin?
Thank you so much. I have a question, a clarifying question, I believe, and Commissioner Soto actually brought it up regarding the majority-minority. And listening to the public comments and the lobbying from the People's Bloc and from Waldorf and so forth, regarding two majority districts. And I want to make sure, and I do understand about the data and keeping records on why we did what we did, and to justify from the data and from the public comments on the map that we are putting forth. But my question is, and I'm concerned that we have not heard from a lot of the diverse communities within the County of Los Angeles. For example, one citizen made a statement that we had not said anything about the Jewish community of interest. There have not been a lot of public comments regarding the Asian community of interest, neither the African-American communities, other than the coalition of the People's Bloc, for example, which is a coalition of community-based activists and concerned citizens, of course. But my statement is, and I really welcome the feedback. Our executive director and everyone has done an awesome job about doing outreach. But I received and looked at a letter from EMC Research that was dated September 10th. And at the bottom of the letter on this particular research public comment, they stated that voters are not following county redistricting closely. A strong majority, 73% of voters, are unaware of county redistricting efforts. Just over 1/4, 27% of voters report having heard or seen something recently about redistricting. We really want to make sure that, and we are being transparent. We have opened up as much as possible outreach, but we have not received the overwhelming or near as close the overwhelming response that we have been receiving from the Latinx community. So I just wanted to bring that up. But in our four maps, we have map scorecards that Pretty has done, and it shows the various different maps, A, B, C, D, and the diversion and the post deep hopper compactness score, all of that. So I'm thankful that we do have that. So taking in consideration the public comments and the passion, and of course, keeping communities of interest such as East LA together, you know, because of the culture, the language, and so forth and so on. But I guess I'm reiterating the fact of what you brought forth already, is to not be so completely swayed that we lose our discernment on what it is that we are called as citizen redistricting to do in this process. So that's just a statement. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. And I think that really shows in a way, you know, the dynamic and the challenges that you face. I mean, I know you're being inundated by lots of comments, maps, proposals, and that's going to continue for a while, so that we all have our own way of parsing information and making determinations. And that's certainly true for all of you, that there are some things that, you know, they don't pass well, that doesn't make sense. Or why are people telling us that? Because that's contrary to what else we're hearing. So I understand that in many, many ways. I have gone through that for many different redistricting cycles in many parts of the country. So I very much empathize. That's something that came out in one of the recordings that we watched. So, but I would recommend, as you suggest, you use your discernment, you use your knowledge. This is your community. You know this community. You have a lot of information about your community. Use that, include that with listening to comments and taking the comments that people make to you, and then as you say, and that's one of my favorite words in redistricting, using your discernment in coming to a decision. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Commissioner Holtzman?
Hi.
Hi.
Counselor. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Hanging in. I have a few questions. I'm a lawyer, so and a data guy. So I'll try and make them brief, but I understand you may not be able to make the answers brief. The first question though is, with this Harris versus Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission case on your slides, what did the racially polarized voting analysis show in that case?
Well, remember that we did legislative and congressional districts. Mm-hmm. So we found our RPV expert, well, we had two. They found significant racially polarized voting in many different parts of Arizona. So that's something that I recommended very early in the process.
That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Sure.
More generally in legal terms, I'm trying to figure out what rationale or rationales, if there are any, that we may use to justify race-conscious redistricting. Addressing past discrimination is something I would like to do, and I think other commissioners might like to do. You should know that such history in districting is why this commission exists. But I mean, can we use past discrimination in society in general? And does it have to be that discrimination that we're talking about have to be limited to LA County? What sorts of rationale can we use to justify race-conscious redistricting?
Jonathan, do you want to kick this one off?
That's a lawyer question.
Oh yeah, I know, but I saw Jonathan's expression.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer, but I kind of play one on TV. Given the Supreme Court's decisions in the Shaw cases, the answer is you can't. Race can't be the predominant reason why you do anything, especially not in a case such as we have here, where there's not evidence of sustained racially polarized voting in recent sets of elections. So I understand your desires. I clearly understand the history. The answer is this Supreme Court has been pretty clear on this in repeated cases, that if the commission were to do that, and someone were to challenge it, you would likely lose.
Just going, piggybacking on what Jonathan said, I agree. If that's your focus, then you're using race as a predominant criterion in redistricting. That's going to be inadvisable. The way, one way to look at this too is if let's say, for example, in the last 2 rounds of redistricting, traditional communities of color were broken up and divided among various districts. And I don't have any knowledge that that happened. I'm just speculating. And you decided that, you know what, to keep communities of interest together, you're not going to do that. So that may address in a sense, and I emphasize in a sense, the desire to keep these historic discrete communities whole. But Jonathan said earlier, you can't pretend or use this as a shield to suggest, well, we're really not doing race-based redistricting. Instead, we're doing this community of interest stuff. And that can be discerned in the record. That can be discerned from how you're approaching this. So, again, this is a transparent process. You cannot use race or a desire to remedy past discrimination, racial discrimination, as a primary consideration in redistricting. That will not work.
Okay, just a couple specific questions on that point. What legal consequences could follow if commissioners make clear and the record reflects that they are deciding on which maps to support, largely based on the number of Latino minority CVAP districts they create?
Well, since as Jonathan said, as you know, in our report, we found no cognizable racially polarized voting in Board of Supervisor elections. So if decisions are being made predominantly based on race, I would have some questions about that. So that would be something I would advise some level of caution and discernment.
Understood.
That's not to suggest that it's not a consideration and you ignore it, but it cannot predominate. That you cannot do that.
Similar question. What fallout could occur from our demographer leading off her presentations about specific maps with a summary that highlights that number, the number of Latino majority, CVAP districts, or from her presenting a scorecard rating the maps which features that number, the number of districts.
And that doesn't concern me, because that really doesn't go to the full breadth of your record and explanations in why you made the decisions that you made. I mean, you could ask us, for example, we could do a presentation that says, oh, each district has this percentage by race and that percentage by race. That's not dispositive. That's not something, or a court is going to say, whoa, look at that. That's racial predomination. That's not racial predomination.
So it's more, I hear from what you're saying, it's more about what the commissioners say they're using to decide, and not what our demographer or others are presenting us, what information.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I mean, you're the body, you're the decision makers.
Understood.
So yes, your comments are the key.
Okay. So what should we do? I mean, okay, let me start with the Voting Rights Act thing. Now that your analysis basically indicates that the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act doesn't apply here because of jingles, how, if at all, might it still apply?
Well, remember, the Voting Rights Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, membership in a language minority group. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees equal protection so that people are not intentionally discriminated against based on race or color. So if you decide, hey, let's just dump all the people of color into one district, that would be a big problem. Voting Rights Act and 14th Amendment. So remember, when you say Section 2, Section 2 is more than vote dilution. And vote dilution has many flavors to it, I guess. So if you're doing something where you're splitting minority communities, dividing communities of color among all 5 districts, cracking them, packing them,
I get it. I know.
Okay.
I've just been concerned that we might have a suit that challenges what we do and subjects our map to strict scrutiny on the basis of racial discrimination or equal protection or a fundamental right challenge with the right to vote, the 14th Amendment sort of thing you were talking about. What should map drawers do so a court will uphold their map if it's challenged in court and subject to strict scrutiny?
See, I know Jonathan's chomping at the bit here.
Okay.
The answer is Bruce's presentation, which is you've justified your decision about why this looks like it looks, and it's not purely based on race. So if at the end of the day, all the testimony about, suppose you adopted a map and all the testimony, both from the commissioners and from the public at large, and all the record reflects is only race, you're gonna lose.
Understood.
We're doing this because we are maintaining historical regions and keeping groups together. You're in good shape. So if you have an explanation, their courts as a lawyer you should know are deferential as long they will not substitute their knowledge for yours as long as there's a record which supports a non-predominantly race-based motive for why the map looks like it does.
I appreciate the presentation. It's still up on my screen over here, especially its focus on the record. My last question is something I wanted to follow up on, partly for Commissioner Morales, who started off this round robin. I think he was trying to get at this. Might we face a reverse discrimination suit based on someone's perception that we have done too much to help a national origin group or one or more racial groups based on the US Constitution, California Constitution, and not the Voting Rights Act? What do you think?
I have to say quickly, you will face suits based on all kinds of crazy things. And so that's a separate consideration. In Arizona, we were sued for lots of different reasons. And if you read the Harris opinion, which I would recommend, the court threw out everything and found basically, I mean, it's after midnight on the East Coast, so I'm going to like wax a little poetically here. They found it was all BS, that they couldn't prove anything. So people will bring all kinds of claims against you. And I don't think you should, don't worry about that in the sense that shouldn't be preoccupying. It's the nature of redistricting. But the key is you create a good record. We will help you if you'd like, create a strong, powerful record so that if you get sued and that case goes to the Supreme Court of the United States, and I am sitting in the courtroom the way I was 10 years ago, and the justices say, hey, let's turn to this page or let's turn to this chart because that supports what the commission did. You will win.
We have a statutory requirement to present a report along with our map. Is that where the record should be contained?
It's not. Well, I know Jonathan had wanted to say something. I wanted to say this quickly. The record is not just the report. The report is part of it. The record is your deliberations, your discussions, your justifications for why you do what you do. All of that is the record. It's much more than the report, although the report is part of it. Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, my one point is, I know it's scary. Bruce and I have been in court a lot about these cases. I don't think you should be defensive and think about how we're going to draw a map that is not going to get you sued. The answer is politics is about distribution of power. There are winners and losers, and people view the courts these days since the 1960s as a way to try to circumvent or to change the outcome. So don't think about how you're going to make a map that's going to be not sued. Think about how you're going to make a map that you basically, in the light of day, feel comfortable that you did what you're legally responsible to do, that you are representing the people of Los Angeles County, that you are following federal and state laws and the Constitution, and let the county and the lawyers, if it gets sued, deal with that.
Okay, I appreciate both of your reassuring answers. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Kenny?
Before we go on, should we take a break?
Yeah, I was just going to get to that. I know I'm looking around at the faces. We still have 3 people to speak, but I think it looks like we really need a break right now. And after this, I think there are 3 more commissioners for clarifying questions, and then we'll move to public comments.
Right.
Okay, so we have a 10-minute break because we'll be on our hour and 45 minutes. 10-minute break. Thank you.
Co-Chair Maeda and Co-Chair Williams, shall we resume? You are on mute, Co-Chair Maeda.
Yes, if we have a quorum.
We are. Can we resume, everyone?
Okay,
I
think
see we have a
we're good.
quorum.
Okay.
And we were, Commissioner Mary Kenny was next up for the round robin.
Okay, so we will move forward with the round robin.
Thank you. I have 3 questions. The first one is that you talk about creating a record. And I'm mindful that we're sitting here on November 10th and our final map has to be delivered to the Board of Supervisors on December 15th. So, I mean, time is of the essence in what we do between now and then. The record right now is replete with comments about how we have to have 2 majority Latino districts counted according to CVAP. And there are lots of comments about how the 4 maps that we're looking at favor one racial group over another. And the thought occurs to me that to create a record that would hold up under scrutiny, perhaps we emphasize the communities of interest that we have worked so diligently to understand. And we did create a spreadsheet. I don't know if it's it's not showing up. It's a spreadsheet ranking the different maps that were submitted according to whether they complied with our communities of interest that we developed. None of the 4 maps, so they were ranked red, yellow, and green. None of the 4 maps have green rankings, all that we selected have green rankings all the way across. All 4 of the maps that we selected create 2 majority Latino districts counted by CVAP. Latinos are almost 48% of the total population in Los Angeles versus 25.5% for whites. But if you use CVAP, Latinos are only 38% of the population versus 33.9 for whites. So there's this huge differential depending on what you use to calculate the racial makeup of a district. So I wonder if you could comment on how we can move forward to create a record that will withstand scrutiny and the relative importance of using general population versus voting age population versus citizen voting age population.
Jonathan, do you want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you start? Because there's some legal questions there. I'll tell you there's some data issues related that we should also talk about.
Okay. Well, I think like we had talked about in one of our initial presentations that VAP, CVAP, those are all complementary pieces in redistricting. And I think that to your point, Commissioner, in focusing on what I had mentioned earlier, these discrete, historic, concentrated, if you will, populations of people, populations of people of color. I think that that's it's clearly one of your criteria. It's a criteria that the Supreme Court recognizes. And I think that my concerns would be different if you had been talking all along about we have to create districts that have 80% CVAP because we need to protect the interests of a certain discrete community of color to elect candidates of choice. My understanding is that that's different, that's not what is occurring now. And I think that having a recognition about CVAP VAP, I think we had mentioned it on perhaps our initial presentation. Those are complementary, important pieces. So again, to Jonathan's point, the moving forward with keeping, if that's something that you are doing, which I'm inferring from what I've seen, that is something that is of significant importance to you, keeping these communities intact so that particularly communities that have a long-standing common bond of whether it's social structure, culture, or whatever it is. I think that's important. But just because you've had discussions about CVAP being a certain level, excuse me, I would be more concerned if you were doing what they did in Alabama or they did in North Carolina. We just have to create districts at this percentage and then move forward to do that. That's a lot different than looking at or being interested in what CVAP and VAP is across the 5 districts you're creating. So Jonathan, what did you want to add?
Yeah, a couple of things. So I would caution a little more than Bruce. If the only rationale for why you chose these 4 maps is because they contain 2 CVAP majority Latino districts, and that's the only reason you're choosing them, that's a problem. That's the only justification for why you're doing what you're doing. So that's, again, this goes to the record. On data, all right, this is something that's not appreciated. So census data is not magical. It is not measured without error, one. So even the decennial census has problems, things that you might have read about or heard about, things like differential privacy. And then we go down to citizen voting age population. This is actually not measured on the federal census. The Trump administration did try briefly to include information on census. Since prior to the 2000 census, there's no census in recent history in the modern era has asked a citizen question of everyone. They asked it on what's called the long form. Some of you might have seen. So most people fill out a census form. It's pretty short. It's just name, how many people in your household, how do you identify by race and ethnic group, right? Pretty basic information. And then a small set sample, about 9 million households, are asked to fill out a long form. In the prior to 2000 census, the long form used to include a question about census. So now when we want to, so that means that we don't actually know the fraction of citizen age population of anything from the census. What instead the census also does to augment their data gathering is that they have something called the American Community Survey, which is basically 100,000 households per month, every month of the year. And on that question, they do ask questions about citizenship on some subset of them. There's different questions in different months. The problem is that when you want to target down to small census geographies, the only way the census releases citizen voting age population is to basically amalgamate 5 years worth of American Community Survey. So for example, the numbers that you're looking at for CVAP in 2021 in Los Angeles is actually data collected from 2015 to 2020. In a community like Los Angeles that is fast changing, that is not a very accurate measure of population if that's what your main goal is. So that's why the courts have always focused, especially on terms of population, they focus predominantly on the federal census and the data about total population, and CVAP and things like turnout secondarily, especially in places where there's historically evidence of racially polarized voting, which is not the case in Los Angeles, at least in the recent history for supervisor board elections. I will put that in quotes. I haven't analyzed recent elections, non-supervisor elections in Los Angeles County recently.
Okay, and actually I only have 2 questions. The second one is, again, focusing on the limited amount of time that we have available to us, how quickly can you analyze the 4 maps that we're considering? And that would include the explanatory material along with those maps. I don't know if anyone, I don't know how we get to the point where someone asks you to do it is kind of, how do we get to that point?
I mean, that's it. I think you and your staff and others have asked that. That's something that we spoke to Holly the other evening, and that's something we'll be speaking about again. If that's something you'd like us to do, of course, that's something we can do, and Jonathan and I can coordinate how we do it and when we do it.
Thank you.
Sure.
If I may also just sort of interject, because I also have been in communication with them about that. And since these are just your base maps and they're going to go through some modifications going forward, Bruce, you'd also suggest it might make sense when you start honing down the options and you make some of the modifications you know you want to make to the maps. So definitely as you get near the end, that'll be very valuable.
And Galen, thank you. And that's a great point. I know typically with other jurisdictions I work with, that the level of analysis and engagement goes up as they have narrowed down their choices. They're pushing out. I don't know if you have a publication requirement and a final round of public comments, but in other places where I work, before the jurisdiction pushes out maps for a final round of public comment, then they asked me to do a different level of analysis. So I agree with Gayla's point too, that as you still have, from what I understand, you haven't narrowed down your choices further. I think that as the process goes forward, with the important information that we've brought out tonight, that information be used as a further guide as you continue with your process, and you get closer to the end of the line, because the one thing is very true. The closer you get to the end, people pay more attention to what you're doing. Whatever you were doing 3 or 4 months ago is not going to be the greatest focus of people's attention. In all the lawsuits Arizona faced 10 years ago, most of the attention was focused on the changes between the draft maps and the final maps. So most of the attention was towards the end, not at the beginning.
Chair Maero.
Thank you, Bruce and Jonathan, for the presentation. For me, it's combining your original presentation and this one was extremely helpful. And I decided to only ask one question because I think the other commissioners have really honed into some important questions. The one comment I'll make, though, is Commissioner Wong hit on a point that I was trying to make probably less elegantly last time about the fact that LA County is a majority minority county has to factor into our analysis in some way. It'd be crazy to ignore that fact. And so I think we do need to consider that as we draw the districts, but keeping in mind, building a record, et cetera, of what it is we're doing. So that's very clear. That's really important. My one question is this. We've heard a justification for drawing districts by at least one map presenter and them talking about why the population for a particular district was lower than other districts, and saying something to the effect of they wanted to account for an undercount, a perceived undercount in the census data, especially with regards to the Latino population. Is it proper or is it legal for us to create a district or districts with a more of an undercount in that district, and then explain, but still within the 10% deviation, of course, but then explain that as well? We wanted to recognize that there's a likely undercount in those districts. Is that legal?
My thought is no, that there's no specific number, nor will there be, that says in LA County was undercounted by 375,000 people. and they're based on, and that can be broken into this category, racial category, this national origin category. There will never be specific data about that. So if you're trying to add to population to compensate, which from media reports and my experience in redistricting is pretty common. Yes, there are undercounts of communities of color. There are typically a lot of significant undercounts in Native American communities, but it's never specified in that I can give you a number. Jonathan can give you a number. Preeti can give you a number that it's this X, Y, and Z. Can't do that. So that just saying, well, we believe the undercount is 300,000 people, and you make that compensation based on race, I wouldn't advise that. Frankly, I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction, certainly none of the others that I work with, that do that. Jonathan, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll add. So it goes back to that question. So the census is not accurate.
Yeah.
However, right, it's not accurate for many reasons. It's not accurate, as we talked about, undercount. It's probably worse counted this time because they did the count in literally the middle of a pandemic, right? I never thought I would be saying that in my lifetime. And so that's one issue. The other issue is that the count is taken on what the population is in April 1st, again. And so that's moving. But the courts have typically said they maintain this sort of fiction, but it's their view that the decennial census is correct. That is the law for the reasons that Bruce talked about, that we don't have good estimates of systematic variation. And therefore I think you would be putting yourselves opening yourselves for legal jeopardy if that was the main rationale for why you chose a particular map or a particular district in a map.
Well, whether it's the main rationale or not, we don't have a basis for saying that as a justification. We shouldn't say that that's a justification for
the courts have pretty clearly come in and said, we take the census as the benchmark. This is the gold standard. This is how we measure population in the United States for the purposes of apportionment.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. There is no way around that. The courts are pretty uniform, and as Jonathan said, it's like it's a fiction in a sense, but the law says the census is accurate. That's the basis for redistricting. That's it.
Commissioner Mendoza.
Thank you. Gentlemen, your presentation and the 2.5 hours discussion following it has been invaluable and timely. My fellow commissioners have asked a number of questions I was going to ask and then some, but I do have two. The first was discussed in a very different context, and it is there a duty or responsibility to fix, correct, rectify an ill or a perceived that has occurred in the past and may have been made by our predecessors of this process?
I mean, again, I think that's not a redistricting criterion to address past discrimination or past injustices specifically. And if that's something that you're looking at or considering, that may have a racial component. Again, then you run into the racial predomination issue. So I think that from my perspective, and I'll mention something that, and another example from Arizona, that Arizona had not before 10 years ago, had not really looked very carefully or as carefully as we did at Native American communities. So we built in a little flexibility in drawing a district that had a significant population from the Navajo Nation. And that was based on analysis we did and analysis that the nation did. So that's something that hadn't occurred before, but we could justify it based on readily acceptable rationales and justifications, culturally and otherwise. So it's showing population shifts on the reservation over time. But that's different than abjectly saying we're going to address this past issue, this past level of discrimination. That by definition is going to have a racial component, significant one, and that could be a fraud exercise.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Was there anything more?
No, just that, and I appreciate that, just again, emphasize what we've talked about, keeping communities together, keeping historic communities, just like we had the benefit, and it really helped me understand a little more about LA. The comments about specific communities that have some historic, cultural common bond, they're not always kept together in redistricting. So, and I think that is a traditional redistricting criterion and something that I recommend all the bodies I work with to examine closely.
Thank you. And my second question is, you referenced the cottage industry of lawsuit challenges, and I was led to believe that we should be expecting a lawsuit or lawsuits. Is there an aspect of our process that tends to be attacked and challenged? And if so, what is it, or are they?
Yeah, the challenge is racial predomination and having a deviation of 15%, for example, having these crazy serpentine districts without any justification, and having a incomplete record where the court and your opponents can make assumptions about what you did and didn't do. Those are all pretty good bases for solid redistricting challenges.
Yeah, just to follow on, lawyers and interested parties will who feel that they lost will sue, whether or not they. So you don't have to, as we now have come to learn in the popular press, you don't actually have to have a very good case. Just because you're sued didn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means someone's trying to see if they can get away with it. So I don't think you should worry. Again, so I will reiterate what I said before. Do not worry about whether or not you get sued. This is a high stakes process, and there are winners and losers. All you can do as a commission is make sure that you can hold your head up high and say, we made reasonable decisions in a transparent way in compliance with state, federal law and constitution.
Thank you.
All commissioners have now had the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. Very engaging, robust conversation and clarifying questions. We're now open to public comments on this. Ty, what do we have?
I believe we currently have 4 for 6A. So we're going to start off with Stephen Ortega. Stephen, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Stephen Ortega, and I'm a former Eastside resident. I currently work with resilient young high school students and young adults in the Eastside community. I'm here today to ask you to move forward with Map A, the People's Block map, which will keep the Eastside together and take into consideration communities of interest, and was created by community members in all parts of LA County. The Eastside communities of unincorporated East Los Angeles, City Terrace, Bow Heights, El Sereno, and Lincoln Heights have a shared cultural history and legacy that make them a larger community of interest that should remain together with the rest of the current supervisory District 1 to further empower this historic community. Any maps that separate the East Side from supervisory District 1 will impact the work that we have been able to accomplish over the past year. The work led us to passing tenant protection for unincorporated cities.
Thank you, Stephen. Your time is up.
Evictions. So, commissioners, I'm asking you to listen to community members and keep the East Side.
Stephen.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Jessica Panduro. Jessica, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good night, commissioners. I wanted to follow up on Bruce Alderson's comment in regards to public comment. I'm concerned he is minimizing the role of community input in LA County. Today, you heard from community members across the county, residents who took time from their schedules to provide you with insight, community members who navigated technology gaps. Those comments should all be respected and not minimized. Please continue to value community input. It is all valuable. I hope community members are not discouraged due to Alderson's perspective. I hope you don't agree with him. I hope this commission continues to listen to others. And I also want to thank Commissioner Zaida Soto for raising this issue.
Thank you, Jessica. Next, we have Barbara Broidy. Barbara, momentarily you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Thank you, Commission. Understanding that there is no right or wrong recipe for coming up with the final map, I'm curious to know whether this commission is deemed particularly vulnerable because they've advanced maps that were submitted to the commission by others without having made any tweaks to them based upon all of the oral and written testimony that was given before releasing the 4 contenders. How does the commission demonstrate that all the earlier testimony was sufficiently considered and taken into account in the adoption of the map? My other concern to the experts has to do with the vulnerability of any public process today succumbing to organized special interest lobbying, whereby small numbers of people are well organized, band together, and manage to have an outsized voice on the process. So just curious in terms of process, how the commission is able to reflect and apply what has been heard, balancing it against realities. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Next, we have Chris Rowe. Chris, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Thank you, Chris Rowe. I have been very engaged in the LA City redistricting. So I want to use the parallel since both the attorney and your experts have talked today about Manhattan. So I would like to ask, for example, if you're down by Staten Island and you get on a bus and you go toward, I don't know if that's north or west, but you're going down Broadway or whatever street, and you're looking for Little Italy, and you happen upon Chinatown, and you end up in the Orthodox community, would each of those be considered distinctive communities of interest? And the reason this comes up is at LA City meetings, they are drawing specifically areas for the Orthodox Jewish community downtown and the Armenian community in the San Fernando Valley and the Jewish community in the San Fernando Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we have Tony Lewis. Tony, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Thank you, commissioners. My name is Tony Lewis. I'm the city councilman for the city of Duarte and District 7. I'd like to thank the 2 experts on their great advice. I totally recommend that the council or the commissioner look at the maps, and maybe I know it's too late to start over, but the lobbying of the one particular map, I don't deem it as fair. All as far as the city of Duarte, we are with the commissioners on any map that they choose, but we would also love to keep our city in with one district. Thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you, Tony. Next, we have Joseph Roth. Joseph, momentarily, you will be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hi, Joseph Roth from the West Side Neighborhood Council. I'm just hoping that tonight we could reach some sort of conclusion about timing for when the experts will actually be vetting these maps or the iterations that end up advancing. If we could kind of formalize it, because it is November 10th already. Just a thought. Appreciate all your service and your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. It looks like for 6A, we have no other in queue.
Thank you, Ty. We're public comment is closed on this item. What's scheduled now is a discussion And we really don't have a motion on this. The concern is we really want to continue to move along the agenda and at least start to talk about the map. So I'm wondering if do we have some burning discussions here, or would we be able to move directly to the maps? And I'm not sure if there's a point of order for that, Holly. Do we?
No, this item was informational only. There's no decision to be made, no motion to be made. It's informational for you to have on hand as you move into considering and the maps and giving direction on tweaks and edits.
Okay, so I'd like to propose, because we've had such a robust discussion, and the questions were very good. I know for myself, I have an enhanced understanding of this. I'd like to propose we move on to the action item 6B, where we look at a review and discussion of the input on the map options. If there's no objection, okay. Co-Chair Maeda.
Let's move to the 6B discussion. We know we have some public comment as well, but as you know, after the public hearing, the first public hearing, the commission did ask ArcBridge to come back with some tweaks that we thought were non-controversial, low-hanging fruit, whatever you want to call it. They've now done that. They have posted those maps, those map options up. We can certainly discuss them. We'll take some public comment, but given the lateness of the hour, I'm hoping that maybe we can agree to advance the so tweaked maps. And then we'll see if there's, ability to just have further discussion as well. But that's my hope and goal for tonight. We may need to have we didn't get very far. We may need to have an additional special meeting to, get further advancement on this. But that's just my thought. Okay, so as far as the staff, report on this, I see Gayla has put up the map options A, B, C, and D, and the tweaks that we have last time agreed to for them to do. They've now been done, as you can see on this on the slide. And there were issues for further discussion, some of which are listed there, and I think they continue on additional slides. But how do you all want to proceed?
We have a couple of hands, Co-Chair.
Okay, sure.
We have Commissioner Zaira Soto, then Commissioner Orpanela Segura.
Co-Chair Marietta, can you clarify? We are at before, so that we can engage in this discussion properly. We're advancing these two. What is it for Pretty to come through with making the modifications, or for public comment?
Okay, so she has already, at our direction, ArcBridge has already created 4 new map options. Which
I'm sorry, I understand that, but we are going to engage in discussion about additional modifications. Is that what I'm understanding? And then we're advancing those two. Instruction for Preeti to make these modifications, and then for public review.
So all I'm suggesting is that at our direction, Preeti has created 4 maps successfully that still pass the thresholds that we need, within the 10% deviation, et cetera, contiguity, et cetera. So since they have successfully been done, and hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at them, I would certainly hope we could, after public comment, we could move on accepting those tweaks as, for instance, map A1, map B1, et cetera. So at least we'll be operating with those maps rather than the original maps, just as one possibility.
Thank you so much.
And there may be other things we may be able to do in a short period of time. I'm not sure.
Okay, I see Commissioner Orpanel Segura has put her hand down, so we're going to move on to Commissioner Holtzman and Commissioner Stetcher.
I'm having a hard time finding the modified maps in the Esri redistricting software. I'm looking at the shared plans, everyone list, and I don't see anything that says that ArcBridge modified it anytime after our last meeting. I see.
So they're up on the hub. I don't know about Esri.
Yeah, we were told that it would be on the Esri software too, and that's what I work with. Pretty, do you know if they're there?
They are done, but I don't think they are on the hub. So I will provide the shape files to Ty so he can have them.
They're on the hub.
They're on the hub. They're on the hub, and also on Esri in the notes section. It says they were modified on 11/3, I think.
So for clarification, the maps are on the hub as presentations. They are not on the hub as Esri layer views. And so they're currently not on the Esri software yet. And once Preeti is able to get to me the shape files, I will upload them to the Esri software. But they are currently available in the PowerPoint submission form in both the hub and on the website.
In fact, I was wondering, because we've received a lot of questions from the public, as well as some commissioners about where the maps are on the hub. Would it be helpful if Ty just showed how we've grouped them on the hub, or are you all comfortable about where they're posted?
Okay.
I think for the public, it might be helpful, maybe if Ty could show that.
I think it'll just take like 2 minutes. Because we had to come up with categories of what are the current maps, what are the maps submitted after your October 28th decision. And you'll see there are maps that are posted that are modifications of A, B, C, D, in addition to Pretty's most recent addition.
Very good. Ty?
Okay.
So from the website, just go to the map, making a redistricting map tab, and then go down to view hub of public submitted map plans. It's going to open up a new tab where all the submitted plans have been included, including the 4 options the commissioners have chosen to move further for public input and discussion. Below those 4 options, you will find all the maps that were submitted after October 28, 2021, labeled sequentially again. So starting with the submission from Commissioner Holtzman, OP032, and then moving on up until the modified versions from ArcBridge, OP038, and then additionally the modified option B from Commissioner Stetcher. Again, these PowerPoints are available on the hub and on the website. And once ArcBridge is able to get to me the shapefile, I will upload them onto the Esri software and then also create the Esri layer view like we have seen for the four options.
I was wondering also at some point, I think it might help, and this, we're late on time, but I think Ty should show people also how you get the more detail information on the Esri maps. You can delve deeper into them, but we can do that another time.
Clarification questions?
Commissioner Wong, then Commissioner Stetcher.
Yes, I was trying to look for the modifications to these maps, and I don't know when they were put up, but I was looking for them and couldn't find them. So I have to admit that I have not had a chance to review all of the modifications. It certainly was not on the PowerPoint certainly wasn't on the agenda when I tried to view it. So I don't know if others have had a chance to review it. If so, we can, certainly proceed with the discussions, but I guess I would not feel comfortable adopting these maps with the changes unless the majority of the other commissioners agree.
I see Commissioner Stetcher has put his hand down, so we're going to move to Commissioner Mendoza.
Thank you. I don't think it's ideal. It's far from ideal for us to start the discussion about the maps after 10 o'clock tonight. I may be the only one that feels that way, but I think it's going to be a healthy discussion, and if a special meeting is needed, I don't know what to say, but am I the only one that feels a little bit late to do that? West Coast, and we have our help on the East Coast at 1 o'clock there. I just don't know.
I appreciate that. Can we, yes, Commissioner Stetcher.
I was just going to say that what I'd like us to do is at the next meeting, begin by putting map A up in as express detail as possible, and let us comment on aspects of it that we like or don't like. If there are any specific changes we would like to direct Pretty and Arkbridge to do, and then move to map B and C and D, and really spend time bringing our local expertise to bear on certain parts of these maps where we may or may not like the way the communities are grouped.
Commissioner Orpanella Segura, then Commissioner Franklin.
Yes, Ava, can you please put the PowerPoint back up? I thought I noticed there was some feedback that I gave, and I think it needs. So under items for, or under issues for further discussion, Linwood should be included with Northeast LA and Southeast LA in District 4. I think I meant that to be District 1.
Okay, hold on. Let me do a modification right here.
Okay.
Just lost it. Hold on. I know why I lost it. Hold on just a second. There it is. Okay. Let me try to share again. I have too many slides open for everyone. Hold on. It should be right here. Let me close some of these others. I'm so sorry. There it is. I've got it. Okay. So Linwood should be.
Yeah, so on that same line, it says District 4, but it should be District 1 based on the feedback that we got.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was also another item on here that Pretty had not addressed, which I believe last time Commissioner Soto also wanted to discuss at some future meeting, how to handle public comment and input from elected officials. So I still have that on the checklist to come back.
Commissioner Franklin?
Yes, Co-Chair Maeda, we did receive public comment with a modification of map A from Mr. Fong, which I thought was really good. So will his map be put forth, or will we get a chance to look at and make comments on his map as well?
Well, as a matter of fact, if we had a more fulsome discussion on maps, that was going to be something I wanted to talk about. But what I would suggest at this point, if there's no other clarifying questions of anybody, we would move to public comment and then discuss how we proceed to talk about maps, whether there's anything we can possibly get done quickly now, or whether we just need to set another meeting. But let's have public comment if we can.
All right, and so we have a couple. Let me go ahead and put the timer up. Of folks who are left, we have Bajan Atashkar. Bajan, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. My name is Bijan Atashkar. I am a resident of LA County. I know there was some discussion. I would also like to echo what Commissioner Mendoza said, that it's 10:07, now 10:08. And if this is a point for public comment, we'd appreciate to have it at a more reasonable hour, hopefully. Also, there was also some comments earlier that interest groups or people who are being paid to make comments are making comments, but there are also people who are not affiliated with any organizations like myself. And I would hope that the commissioners would take into account what the public has to say and what the public's feelings are, because those are also very, very important for an important issue like redistricting across LA County. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Rowe. Chris, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
I believe that Commissioner Stetcher, when he discussed his maps last time, made a statement that he lived in Santa Monica and that he actually had accidentally divided it. And I believe there was a lot of public testimony that Santa Monica should be whole. And so I believe that the list that you guys were just posting for Pretty to consider for each of the maps, Santa Monica, that's why I mentioned it earlier tonight, that Santa Monica should be drawn into another district. And again, I mentioned the sunset boundary and map 27 that was submitted by the Las Virgenes. It's Kim Lamori and it's the Las Virgenes. It's the COG that supports that area. That map is very similar to Commissioner Stetcher's map B, I believe. And so I would like you to look at keeping Santa Monica whole and putting it in a different district. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. With that, we have one more, but it might be the wrong agenda item. But yeah, we have Jackie Contreras next. Jackie, momentarily you'll be able to unmute yourself, and once you begin speaking, you will have 1 minute to make your public comment.
Good evening, Commissioner. Sorry, I wasn't sure what item we were on. But to Commissioner Orpinela Segura's comment to Map A, Linwood is actually paired with the Southeast LA communities and SG4. We moved Linwood out of SG1 just to keep it with the Select communities because there was strong feedback in that area. Thank you, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. With that, I see no other in queue.
Okay, let's close public comment on this item 6B. Is there a sense that even with regard to the so-called tweaked map options A, B, C, and D, folks are not comfortable with advancing those as A1, B1, C1, D1 in place of the originals?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat your question?
So at the public hearing, at the end of the public hearing, we agreed that there were certain tweaks that we generally felt were non-controversial, and we would ask ArcBridge to make those tweaks. They have done that. So those maps are now posted, at least on the hub. And I think it's reasonable for us to say we are now going to be asking the public to look at maps A1, B1, C1, and D1, which are the tweaked versions of those map options.
Co-Chair Williams?
I'd like to make a motion that I'd like to make a motion that we move those maps to A1, B1, C1, because these were the changes we wanted made, and we decided on that at the last meeting. So they've been done. We agreed on them, and at least we can look at those, but we'll move those into what the consideration for maps. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but I want us to adopt those maps for us to continue to look at A1, B1, C1, and I think maybe to D2. So for all the ones that would change, I'd like to see us use those and move those forward.
Yeah, each of the original 4 were tweaked.
Okay. So
I second.
Further discussion? Again, just to be clear, we're not adopting any map in a sense. We are saying these are the ones we want to bring to the public to focus on, to comment on. And by way of narrowing the issues in a sense, and by correcting things, because Catalina obviously cannot belong to a district that doesn't have a ferry service. So we fixed the two of the maps for that, made that tweak in two of the maps. Commissioner Kenny.
Yes, even though they weren't posted in Esri, they were posted in the materials for tonight's meeting and also on the website, including data on each district in the tweaked maps. So I think that we have enough information to actually adopt the tweaked maps.
Ty, I can't see whether there's other.
I believe there are no other commissioner hands up.
It's been moved and seconded to put forward the tweaked maps as our new map options for the public's consideration at the next public hearing. Is there a call for the question? Commissioner Mendoza calls for the question. Ty, can you go ahead and do the?
I may not have understood what you asked. I wanted to ask the
I'm
tweaks, that are referenced. These are the corrections, right? The tweaks are what was intended originally, but weren't included in the maps.
Okay, so Gayla, can you show that slide again? I'm sorry, so we can all see what we're talking about. So at the conclusion of the public hearing, we agreed we wanted to instruct ArcBridge to make these tweaks that are in the top half of that slide. For A, to put Catalina Island with District 4. For B, to make those changes, C and D, et cetera. That's all we asked ArcBridge to do. I'm hesitant to say whether that was in the original submitter's view that they just made a mistake or what. In some cases that's true, in other cases it may not be, but this is what the commission said we should do. And all we're talking about now is substituting the A1, B1, C1, D1 for the original A, B, C, and D. That's it.
Okay. Understood. Thank you.
I see no other hands.
Is there a call for the question? Well, is there any need to further discuss?
Question?
Okay. I don't know if you can make the motion and call. I guess you could make the motion and call the question. If there's no other discussion, Ty, can you take roll?
Okay, commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. I will now take roll call. Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Yes.
Commissioner Priscilla Orpinella Segura.
Yes.
Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Brian Setcher.
Yes.
Commissioner John Bento.
Yes.
Co-Chair Carolyn Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
I abstain.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Yes.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
I abstain.
Commissioner Mary Kenny.
Yes.
Co-Chair Daniel Maeda.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Aye.
Commissioner Apollonia Morales.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Is there any other motion that anyone feels can garner support without extended discussion?
Commissioner Kenny.
Yes.
We need a motion to ask the Voting Rights Act advisors to analyze the 4 maps, or is the sense of the commission that it's okay to postpone doing that?
So I know that they have begun analyzing the original 4 map submissions. I'm sure that I don't think that the tweaks will have changed it too dramatically, but I'm sure that they will now focus on the A1, B1, et cetera. Beyond that, is it, I'm just not sure like what's in the budget and so forth, whether do you need further direction, I guess maybe is the best question, Bruce and Jonathan, from the commission as to what you should be doing now?
And I think that, thank you, Commissioner. Jonathan, I don't think is with us anymore tonight. That's something that, you know, as we said earlier, we'll have discussions with you, with Gayla, with Holly, and we'll figure out the best way forward. So that's, you know, Jonathan and I have certainly talked about it. That's certainly something that we are prepared to do. And we're very eager to have additional discussions with Holly and Gayla and the commission about that.
If I may also just reinforce, I think you need to have a more robust discussion also on some of the other modifications submitted and some of the extensive public input you've gotten in terms of other modifications people want. So the more cost-effective option would be to synthesize some of those changes and then have them look at that. You may end up narrowing your list from 4 options down to 2 or 3.
And if I could, Gayla, I absolutely agree. I think that since you're not at the stage where
early,
yeah, everything, you've narrowed everything down, and if you have a lot of other public comments that you're considering and that you may incorporate, I think that as that is done, I certainly agree it's more cost effective and more efficient overall to wait for that to happen before we really wade into your maps fully.
So I'll just mention, because it's still a bit of a moving target. I've given the commissioners, and it's posted on the website, 4 pages of public comment that we received. We received 300 comments at the last public hearing, and these go back to November 3rd of suggested modifications. And I think you all have to have a discussion of those 4 pages plus additional comments we've gotten tonight that are posted on the website, written comments, oral comments. And some of these are easier changes than others, and some of the requested changes are going to be more significant. But I think you really need to take a good 2 hours and just really focus on this particular agenda item as your sole focus. When you're fresh and you're bright-eyed and can really delve into it.
I agree. And I do think some of I certainly would encourage you, as Commissioner Franklin has suggested, to look at some of the newest submissions, because I know 36, it looks to me like a very interesting modification of option A. And I know Commissioner Stetcher put one in. I have not even looked at that one yet. So some of these could be very, very helpful in terms of helping us narrow down, and some of them purport to have done some of the things that many of us have talked about Torrance and Pomona, et cetera. Co-Chair Williams.
And I just wanted to, I'm just going to say, introducing to the discussion, because I agree with Gayla and with Bruce that we still need more robust discussion on these maps, but even think about, do we want to continue with 4 maps? Will we be moving, dropping some? Will it be 2 maps at some point? Because I just think those are some of the questions we need to think about as we move along, as we move ahead.
Okay, so it doesn't look like there's a stomach for any further discussion tonight of it. I think we do need to have an additional meeting prior to our next public hearing, which is, next Wednesday. So I guess that let's conclude this for now, subject to reopening at the next meeting, and we'll have to talk about when that next meeting is. But what is the next agenda item?
You're muted.
It's the approval of the minutes.
Consent.
Okay.
Those are minutes.
The up for approval is possible approval or the minutes for November 3rd and November 7th. November 3rd minutes, are there any comments, questions, proposed revisions to that one?
Commissioner Holtzman?
Yeah. Mr. Clerk, hi. I emailed you a proposed revision to the November 3rd minutes. Could you possibly put that up on the screen, please?
Of course.
Okay. And I'm just calling up the minutes themselves, the proposed minutes themselves. Okay, so this is to page 7. To the there's a bit of a free-for-all at the end of the meeting, and I've proposed this revision that you can see on the screen to more accurately reflect what went on there. So I would, move the approval of minutes with this revision. The top is the red line version, and the bottom is how it would read if the revision were accepted.
Commissioner Holtzman has moved to amend the minutes in this fashion. Is there a second? Does anybody need more time to read? Commissioner Holtzman, there's a motion, but I don't see a second.
No, I was just moving to approve them. I could explain the revisions. Whatever.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to revise the minutes in this fashion.
I need for the record who seconded it. I'm sorry.
Commissioner Stetcher.
Commissioner Stetcher. Is there, does anybody want Commissioner Holtzman to elaborate or explain the revisions?
Only if it can be done in 30 seconds.
All right.
It's just to more accurately reflect what I said. I hadn't actually made some of the assertions that were in the draft, and I wanted to make clear that what it was that I said. Okay, let's see if we can just pick out one thing. So yeah, some commissioners mentioned, they questioned the merits of the statement that I had read. The part of the statement I had read, they couldn't be questioning the merits of the whole statement, for instance. So I just thought this is more accurate and clear. And I also did want to point out that Coach Hermay actually called for if there was anything for the good of the order. So that's why I put that at the beginning.
Holly, do we need to vote on the amendment, or how do we proceed?
My motion, if you'll excuse me, was to approve the minutes with this revision made, not to
Right.
vote.
So the vote on this motion would be to approve the minutes as amended.
Okay. Any further discussion? Let's go ahead and vote on this then.
Okay, commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic and respond when your name is called. I will now take roll call. Commissioner Priscilla Orpanela Segura.
No.
Commissioner Haile Soto.
No.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher, Commissioner Stetcher. We will come back to Commissioner Stetcher. Commissioner Bento,
No.
Co-Chair Williams,
No.
Commissioner Dorina Wong,
Um, I'm getting a little tired, I have to admit. I abstain.
Commissioner Jean Franklin,
No.
Commissioner David Holtzman,
Yes.
Commissioner Mary Kenny,
Yes.
Co-Chair Maeda,
Abstain.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza,
No.
Commissioner Apolonio Morales,
No.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon. Commissioner Wood.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. No.
And then Commissioner Stetcher, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay, motion fails.
Is there a motion to, well, let me ask about the next set of minutes and see if we can do these together. Are there any corrections, revisions to the November 7th minutes, draft minutes?
If I could just interject here, I think we probably could thank and release Bruce from sitting through the rest of this. I just saw he was still there, and I apologize for interrupting, but
And also pretty.
yes, thank you. All right.
Thanks very much,
All right,
Bruce.
thank you. My pleasure. Good night. See you soon.
It's very helpful tonight.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
November 7th minutes. Any revisions to that? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the November 3rd and November 7th meeting minutes as drafted and circulated.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a hand from Commissioner Holtzman.
Yes, Commissioner Holtzman.
Yeah, I move we postpone this matter until the next meeting so people have a better chance to read my suggested amendments and understand.
I believe that motion for approval of the minutes as amended already failed.
No, I'm moving to postpone the motion that was just made, postpone consideration of the motion that was just made.
Is there a second to the motion to postpone approval of the minutes? I see none. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for November 3rd and 7th. If there's no further.
Of course there's discussion. Hello.
Yes.
Now I guess it's time for me to explain my revisions in detail, because without them, I'll have to oppose the the approval of the minutes because it would be inaccurate. So let's start from the beginning. I suggested noting that Co-Chair Marietta asked if there was anything for the good of the order. And I just clarified in my revisions that I was recognized to make a comment for the good of the order. I added a note that Co-Chair Marietta asked me to make brief. And then I did not review the highlights of the 6-page statement, but I read the first page of the 6-page statement. So I suggested changing the minutes to be accurate on that point. And my statement prepared was not, I did not state that the county's retention of KH violated the statutory conflict of interest provisions applicable to the commission, because that would be ridiculous. The county can't violate any provisions that are applicable to the commission. I did not say that the county has failed to provide accurate 2020 census data in the mapping software. So I suggest changing that sentence to saying that I read the first page of a 6-page statement regarding the county's retention of KH Consulting Group and what I called the incompleteness of the mapping resources the county has provided the commission and the public for redistricting purposes. I also added, because I think it's important, that I was willing to dispense with the reading of the rest of the statement and instead submit the statement for inclusion in the minutes to save time. I think that's an important thing to include. The draft minutes say that Co-Chair Williams ruled that the comments were not properly agendized and were out of order. I changed that to Co-Chair Williams said the comments were not properly agendized and were out of order because Co-Chair Williams was not the presiding officer at the time. So she was in no position to make a ruling. Co-Chair Marietta was the presiding officer at the time. I also pointed out, I said, Commissioner Holtzman said there's no need to agendize comments offered in response to a call for items for the good of the order. Some commissioners question, so I left that in, that some commissioners question the merits. I clarified that it was just the part of the statement that they'd heard, that I'd read. And then I added, a little more detail at the end. I said that I had said I would send the full statement to the commission's clerk for inclusion in the minutes. And that Co-Chair Marietta assured me that, in quotes, we will read the statement. Those are the only changes I made. It might be helpful if I were to show you, or Holly could show you, because I emailed her, the meaning of for the good of the order in the context of a meeting. But I don't necessarily think we need to do that right now. It's basically a part of a meeting where people can raise, you can make comments about what the commissioner or whatever the body's been doing without having to have a specific item on the agenda. So again, I will tell you that without making revisions like these, especially because the draft misrepresents what my statement said, the minutes would be inaccurate, and so I could not support the motion on the floor at this time.
Co-Chair Williams.
Co-Chair Williams.
Question?
Any further discussion? It's been called for the question. Ty, can you take roll?
Okay, commissioners, please be prepared to unmute your mic. Commissioner Hyla Soto.
Yes.
Commissioner Saida Soto.
Approve.
Commissioner Brian Stetcher.
Commissioner Stetcher, you were on mute.
No.
Commissioner John Vento.
Yes.
Co-Chair Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner Dorina Wong.
I'm sorry, question, is this for November 3rd and
Both.
November 7th?
Correct.
Okay. I have to abstain because I missed the end of November 7th, the November 7th meeting. I had to leave early.
Commissioner Jean Franklin.
Yes.
Commissioner David Holtzman.
No.
Commissioner Mary Kenny.
Yes.
Co-Chair Maeda.
Aye.
Commissioner Mark Mendoza.
Move for approval.
Commissioner Apollonia Morales.
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson Obregon.
Yes.
And Commissioner Priscilla Orpanela Segura.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And next on the agenda.
Executive Director's report.
Yes, and this will be very short. I just want to announce that we have upcoming public hearings. Public hearing number 2 and a special meeting will be on Wednesday, November 17th. It does start at 6:30. The next one will be Wednesday, December 1st, 6:30, public hearing number 3. And then on Tuesday, December 7th at 6:30 will be public hearing number 4. I do want to make sure the public understands, and this is in our agenda, that we are posting that people who want to make public oral comments need to sign up by 8 p.m. So they're on the list. And that's it.
We have a hand for Commissioner Orpinella Segura.
Not sure if this is appropriate at this time or if it should be taken offline. I had a question about the doodle, specifically the time. I selected Pacific LA, but the start time shows at 8. So I just want to make sure.
Yes. All right. So I sent out a doodle so we can come up with a day for special. Brian Stetcher is our expert on how you change the time zones. I put in all the time zones to be LA time, 7 o'clock, except I think there's a Sunday option, which was 2 o'clock. Brian, do you want to give them the tutorial, or I'll find you your notes and I'll send it out to you all. If you go to the top of the doodle thing, it will say something about a time zone and you click and you should be able to get Pacific Standard Time.
I did that, but it would still.
But it still shows 8 p.m.
Yeah.
I put it in as 7. So click it, it's 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
So 7, and then the
7,
Sunday.
you know what's happening.
And then the Sunday is 2?
2.
Or 4.
2 or 4?
Wasn't it?
Actually, Coach
you just-
Maeda, I had to withdraw the 4 o'clock option because I couldn't be there.
Okay.
So 2 p.m.
There are 4 options. And I'll probably now need to send out another doodle if we want a special meeting before November 17th.
Let's see if we can do that, because we really need to have maybe a 2-hour focused discussion of maps.
Yeah,
I
because
know
there are a lot
Commissioner-
of modifications you just really need to ponder.
Absolutely.
So for clarification, we should still complete the recent doodle and then.
Let's do that one, because I'm very confident that after the November 17th public hearing, you'll want to have a special meeting to modify the maps further before we post for the December 1st public hearing. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I was going to remind people about the doodle, but I didn't want to take your time, but they're important to do. So I'm sorry about the time zones. I know some of you got European time zones, you got China, but I assure you, I put it in as LA. So.
Okay, 7 p.m. So please fill those out, and the next upcoming doodle as well, to see if we can get a quorum for additional special meeting. And with that, we are adjourned.
Go outside.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Night.
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 Night, John Boy.
10:41.